Chapter 905. The gold squandering den could be said to be the #1 underground black market in the Tianwu continent, as well as the #2 entertainment sacred ground in the Tianwu continent. Just based on the gold squandering den, when the flow of customers was high, the profits of a single day were comparable to the profits of the Chamber of Commerce in a month when Lin Yuan first opened up the market for controlling spiritual items. A full 300 years. One could imagine how wealthy that demon venerable was. After talking about the gold squandering den, it was time to talk about the gentle village. Because of this existence, Lin Yuan had noticed demon venerable Qin Jiang, who had rarely appeared in the past 300 years. This was because Li Zhong would occasionally go to the Black Water Dragon King temple to pray and contact Lin Yuan, saying that demon venerable Qin Jiang was attempting to open a gentle village branch in the northern frontier. If not for the demon the Arch Association's ability and Luo Su's ruthlessness, the gentle village branch in the northern frontier would have been completed. As the #1 entertainment sacred ground in the Tianwu continent, the gentle village was actually a brothel. The ladies there were proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Other than that, there were also demi-humans with mixed blood, slaves from the various empires, and even some chivalrous men and women from the mortal world. As long as the customer made a request, the gentle village would satisfy the customer. Regardless of male or female, as long as one went to the gentle village to seek pleasure, they would no longer be interested in ordinary women. They would go to the gentle village again, and it could be said that they enjoyed themselves so much that they forgot to return. Other than that, the drinks and dishes in the gentle village came from all over the world. Regardless of whether it was the famous wine or the homebrewed wine, the menu was complete. The chefs working there were also famous existences in the world. Any dish that was sold to the mortal world would be worth tens of thousands of gold. Even if the nobles of the various empires wanted to eat it, they would have to go through a lot of trouble. Furthermore, the gentle village did not require money. Even if a penniless beggar entered the gentle village, he would be able to enjoy the treatment that even the emperor would not be able to enjoy. But as the saying goes, lust is a bone-shaving knife. The land of warmth and tenderness indeed didn't require money because what was collected there wasn't money or spiritual items, but the essence energy and spiritual essence unique to every living being. When a human's spiritual essence was damaged, they would wither and become seriously ill. Even cultivators were the same. Losing a little bit of spiritual essence would decrease the efficiency of their cultivation. If their spiritual essence was depleted, they would die on the spot no matter how high their cultivation was. The spiritual essence of demonic beasts was the same. If they lost half of their spiritual essence, they would return to their original form and become wild beasts. If they lost all of their spiritual essence, they would die on the spot. The extracted spiritual essence was not wasted either. It was all refined into various elixirs by the demon venerable. Some of them were used to supplement one's innate spiritual essence. Even those who had no cultivation aptitude could embark on the path of cultivation after eating this kind of elixir. The more they ate, the better their aptitude would be. Some of them were used to prolong one's life. Every elixir that entered the market would be snatched up. Such elixirs were sold by the pill. Any one of them would be equal to the total income of the gold squandering cave for half a year, or even more. When people talked about the land of warmth and tenderness, they would definitely curse, wishing that they could destroy that dirty place. But the number of customers who went to the land of warmth and tenderness increased, and the elixirs refined by the land of warmth and tenderness became more and more popular. If there was anyone in the Sky Martial continent that didn't do business with the land of warmth and tenderness, it would be the northern frontier. The northern frontier was in need of money, but this kind of money, regardless of whether it was Lin Yuan or Li Zhong, they disdained to earn it. In the eyes of the great spirit demon venerable, regardless of whether it was a human or a demonic beast, there was no difference. They were just livestock that were being raised. They continued to bring all kinds of treasures and cultivation techniques into the gold squandering cave, causing the business of the gold squandering cave to become more and more prosperous. Their inventory grew more and more, and their reputation grew bigger and bigger. There were even people who went to the land of warmth and tenderness, like lambs jumping into a fire pit, allowing the demon venerable to refine them into elixirs that were sold at high prices. This was never a secret. It was just that no one had ever seen the true form of the demon venerable, and no one could punish the demon venerable. Even the guardian of the heavenly gate didn't care. No one knew if it was because they had suffered a loss from the demon venerable, or if the demon venerable was like Lin Yuan, giving them a large amount of benefits, and thus didn't want to care about it. Looking at the legends and novels, most of the almighty people saw the people as livestock. When a piece was placed, no matter how many innocent people were implicated, they would not be moved at all. In the journey to the west, the heavenly emperor was able to prevent rain from falling for 3 years because the governor of Fengxian County had knocked over his tribute. How could he have imagined what kind of purgatory Fengxian County would become after 3 years? Some people said that these almighty people were heartless and treated the people as grass, and that they themselves were beast-like existences. But the current Lin Yuan had a different view. After all, he was half a step into the realm of almighty people. It was just that he still had some stubbornness in his heart. Furthermore, he had not cultivated for a long time, so he seemed to have some human characteristics and still had some bottom line. To be more realistic, most of the cultivators came from the mortal world. But once they succeeded in their cultivation, they were different from immortals and mortals. They could go into seclusion for more than 100 years. By the time they came out of seclusion, most of the people they knew would have turned into dust. So what if their bloodline was still in the world? Those people were no longer people they knew. Year after year, the human side of them became less and less. In the end, they became people who had forgotten their emotions. If it were those ordinary people, they would not give up the benefits that they could easily obtain for some people they did not know. Just like Lin Yuan. When he first came to this world, although he had the body of a demonic beast, he still thought of himself as a human. In order to survive, he could eat wild beasts and demonic beasts alive. He would also save a human because of a moment of kindness. But now, Lin Yuan found it hard to convince himself that he was still a human. Of course, he still had some conscience and bottom line, so he set up the new law of the northern frontier. He wanted to build a world where humans and demonic beasts lived together. However, it was expected that as he grew older, Lin Yuan's human side would quickly fade away. Perhaps one day in the future, he would also become an existence that regarded human life as worthless. Just like the game between Taishang and Haotian, the Great Qin Empire wiped out the 6 countries, and countless fresh lives were turned into yellow soil and withered bones. Perhaps one day, he would also be like that, playing a game with an unknown existence. With a single thought, countless ordinary people would pay the price of their lives. Perhaps there was a trace of unwillingness. Therefore, Lin Yuan did his best to build the northern frontier, set up the Willowstone Ocean, and built the things that he was familiar with in his previous life. He wanted to leave behind more karma and do his best to preserve his human side. How sad would it be to exist purely as a god? Chapter 906. But Lin Yuan was still quite interested in the news of Qingjiang's southern desolation. Not to mention that Qingjiang Demon Venerable wanted to extend his hand into the northern frontier. Even if he stayed in southern desolation, Lin Yuan would find a way to find trouble with him. Once Willowshire Sea Area's city of trade was established, with his previous life's business philosophy, the convenient transportation formation, and the absolutely safe logistics, he would be able to sweep through the endless sea in a short time. Then he would be able to enter the outer sea area without competing with those demon beasts for territory. Just like the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce in Hengduan Mountain Range, he would be able to easily open a trade route. At that time, all the enemies in front of him would have to be dealt with cleanly. Shenwu Dynasty's southern desolation would have to be in his hands, and he would also have to take down Qingjiang Imperial Dynasty, who was proficient in naval warfare, to ensure that the things he transported from the endless sea would not be intercepted. That demon venerable in southern desolation was naturally on the list of people to kill. That's right, southern desolation has always been famous for its goo techniques. Many of my subordinates had once gone to Gold Squandering Cave to buy evil goo, and among them, there was a goo item that had a similar effect. It resides in the host's body and can continuously read the host's memories and transmit them to the Gu Master of Southern Desolation. At that time, the Gu Master of Southern Desolation would contact the guard of Demon Venerable's arsenal and choose a suitable cultivation method to transmit to the host through the Gu item. When the host obtains a suitable cultivation method, his cultivation would naturally advance by leaps and bounds. But as the evil Gu grows bigger, its appetite would naturally increase as well. At first, the evil Gu would only occasionally steal a trace of primeval qi into the stomach, but once it matures, it would swallow all the primeval qi and astral qi in the host's body, even going deep into the qi sea and completely eating the host into a cripple. After that, this demonic Gu will hibernate in the host's body for half a year. If the host remains a cripple in this half a year, the demonic Gu will leave the Dantian qi sea and eat the host's body until it becomes an empty shell. Then the Gu Masters of Southern Desolation will retrieve it. If the host has a fortuitous encounter, the demonic Gu will copy the fortuitous encounter and send it back to the Demon Venerable's arsenal, then devour the host completely. It can be said to be extremely cruel. Su Yan's voice was somewhat cold as he smiled and said, "Your current situation is similar to an evil parasite entering your body. I heard that the Black Jiao had caused quite a commotion in the Endless Sea. If it obtains this evil parasite, you won't be able to endure it." "Then, what should I do now?" Lei Fan's voice was trembling, as though he was extremely terrified. However, Su Yan smiled disdainfully and said mockingly, "The so-called Gu art is just a small Dao. If Gu art is really that powerful, how can orthodox cultivators run amok? It is only the Southern Desolation that has a strange terrain and climate that allows Gu worms to breed. If you can suppress the greed in your heart and not cultivate that cultivation technique, the demonic Gu will not be awakened. As time passes, the demonic Gu will naturally starve to death and will not harm your life. But when that demonic Gu dies, your cultivation technique will have no foundation and will automatically disperse from your sea of consciousness." To a cultivator, cultivation methods were absolutely crucial. Because of an incomplete secular scripture, Taoist Red Cloud had been stuck at half-step void nether realm for half his life. Every year, he had to invest real gold and silver into the money-squandering cave to see if he could complete secular assembly. After meeting Lin Yuan, he did not even have to think about it and bet secular assembly on it. Moreover, the cultivation techniques deduced from secular assembly scripture, regardless of their grade, were the most suitable for the cultivator. If one cultivated according to the scripture, as long as one was not born with a crippled body, their cultivation efficiency would be doubled with half the effort and their battle strength would far surpass those of the same stage. If Lei Fan was willing to give up on such a cultivation technique, that would be strange. Such a temptation was not something that anyone could resist. "May I ask the exalted deity, is there any other way?" Lei Fan raised an eyebrow and clasped his hands together towards Su Yan, who had come out from the shadows, his eyes filled with unwillingness. He was a descendant of the imperial family of the Shenwu dynasty. Even if he was from a side branch, his eyesight was extraordinary. Although his cultivation was not deep, but he knew clearly how rare the cultivation technique in his sea of consciousness was. He could even say with certainty that if he missed out on such an opportunity, he would not be able to find another cultivation technique that was on par with it in his entire life. Ah! The same light laughter came from Lin Yuan and Su Yan at the same time. Having said that, Lin Yuan could see through Su Yan's tricks. Not to mention whether the Southern Wasteland Sinister Gu really existed, Su Yan was obviously coveting the cultivation technique of secular assembly scripture. After all, after entering the host's body, it could automatically evolve into a cultivation technique that was suitable for the host. Only Lin Yuan, who had cultivated the real secular assembly scripture, could only covet it. Otherwise, if such an opportunity was placed in front of him, he would not let it go so easily. Relax your mind and let me enter your sea of consciousness to explore and see what kind of cultivation technique the Black Jiao had imparted to you is. At the same time, I will see if there are any Gu worms in your body. If there are, I will kill them for you. But I will not completely remove them. I will wait until you have recorded down the cultivation technique in your sea of consciousness before I will completely remove them. What do you think?" Su Yen spread out his two black palms and said with a smile, "Of course, you can also take it that I am coveting your cultivation technique. So, you can totally reject me. But this is your only chance. You will have to bear all the consequences." Lin Yuan could disconnect the connection of the secular assembly scripture at any time to ensure that Su Yen would not be able to find any trace of it. But thinking about it, the secular assembly scripture was a two-way thing. Don't look at how others who cultivated the secular assembly scripture would get a cultivation technique that was specially tailored for them. But just like that gentle village, there was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. You have to give up something to gain something. Those who cultivated the secular assembly scripture would become one of the living beings. As long as he had accumulated enough power of the living beings, Lin Yuan would be able to replicate everything of Su Yen. Even if he could not use these things as he wished, at least he would be able to understand how powerful his enemy was. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will not be defeated in 100 battles. Who would give up a chance to study their opponent thoroughly? On the other side, Lei Fan thought about it for a moment and finally made up his mind. He said in a deep voice, "I am ready. May the exalted deity please check if there are any goo worms in my body." Very quickly, a strange force penetrated deep into the secular assembly scripture. Obviously, Su Yan's actions were faster than Lin Yuan had expected, and he was also more impatient. Almost at the same time Lei Fan's voice fell, he had already made his move, wanting to get his hands on this strange cultivation technique. However, Lin Yuan was thinking about another thing at this time. Shadow Demon Su Yen, why did he have the method to create immortals? Chapter 907. When Su Yen invaded Lei Fan's Sea of Consciousness, it was just as Lin Yuan had expected. The first thing Su Yen did was not to check on Lei Fan. Instead, Su Yen went straight for the ball of information that recorded the contents of the life scripture. After completely copying it down, Su Yen did not cultivate it immediately. Instead, he turned his head and started to continuously channel energy into Lei Fan's body, checking if there were any abnormalities within Lei Fan's body. Lin Yuan muttered to himself for a moment before he finally understood the reason behind Su Yan's actions. A cultivation technique of the level of the life scripture was something that even gods would not be able to avoid coveting. However, what Su Yen had said about the southern wasteland evil goo should not be baseless. After obtaining this cultivation technique, he naturally would not cultivate it immediately. Other than checking on Lei Fan, he also wanted to see if there were any abnormalities after Lei Fan cultivated it. This kind of action was in line with the style of an evil god. After all, the power of incense was the most precious resource in a world. Those high and mighty big shots, in order to prevent more fake gods from appearing and competing with them for the power of incense, had set up a threshold, causing the cultivation realm of the heaven martial world to stop at the void realm. They had also divided the human factions into different empires. Every expert of the Heaven's Gate Guardian should have a territory where they could harvest the power of incense. Those resources that they had plundered were only for the sake of nurturing their own juniors. Whether or not they had it, they did not really care. However, the power of incense was different. Even the powerful dragon race of the Four Seas could only breed their own tribes to obtain the power of incense. It was even more so for the human race, whose forces were intertwined with one another. If they did not even have enough for themselves, how could they share it with other cultivators? This was especially so for someone like Su Yen, who was not a Heaven's Gate Guardian. He had found another way to obtain the faith of the assassins of the Heaven Martial World. However, this was still considered as competing with the real big shots for incense. If he did not have an exquisite heart, he would have long been killed by others. It seemed like there wouldn't be any harvest in the near future. Lin Yuan sighed faintly and wrapped his arms around Lei Qiusheng's shoulders again. Let's go back first and go our separate ways after we pass through the forest of hungry ghosts. You go to the Wei River battle line and tell them to leave some emergency personnel behind. There's no need to waste everyone there. The demon cult in the south is most likely done for. Without these allies, the sky demon won't let go of this fat piece of meat in the south. They won't do something as stubborn as biting down on the northern frontier. Therefore, other than those on duty, Everyone should immediately go to the northern frontier prince's residence and await orders. Lei Qiusheng nodded slightly. His figure moved, and he once again swept in the direction of the forest of hungry ghosts. Yang Qinglin stood in place silently for a moment. He stretched out his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. With a flip of his right hand, he tightly clenched a small broken blood-colored banner and cursed, "This time, it's a big loss." Putting the small blood-colored banner back into his sleeve, Yang Qinglin took 2 deep breaths. He turned into a blood-colored streak of light and chased after Lei Qiusheng, who was gradually getting further and further away. After the group had completely left, only then did Red Cloud open his eyes and look at Luo Yu, who was flying in the sky. He jokingly said, "Did you see that? That guy is showing off." Luo Yu was silent for a moment. He sneered and said, "That guy has one of the fragments of the Six-Soul Banner. Although it's not as powerful as it used to be, it's getting more and more terrifying in the world of heaven and martial arts. If he really wrote our names on it, I'm afraid that he would immediately be erased from the world of heaven and martial arts and lose his life." The Six-Soul Banner was a treasure that was very difficult to grade. It used to be the most precious treasure of Tongtian. By writing the opponent's name on the tail of the banner, he would use a talisman to worship it in the morning and evening. On the day of worship, he would wave the banner and change the world of heaven and earth. A complete Six-Soul Banner with 6 tails could take away the lives of 6 people. Even the immortal saints could not escape the fate. In the original book of Investiture of the Gods, Tongtian wrote the names of Jieyin Taoist, Xuanti Taoist, Laozi, Yuanshi, King Wu, and Jiang Shang on the tail of the banner. Among the 6 people, there were 4 saints. It could be seen that the power of this treasure was enormous. It could even be said that the 10,000 Immortals formation was not the killing move of Jie sect, but the Six-Soul Banner was. However, Tongtian lost in the end. Long Ears Dingguang Immortal, who was responsible for waving the banner after the 10,000 Immortals formation was activated, defected and joined the camp of Yuanshi Tianzuan together with the Six-Soul Banner. As a result, Jie sect, which was not inferior to Rin sect and Chan sect, was dragged into the calamity. Only Divine Mother, who was not tainted by the calamity, escaped under the hint of Tongtian. In the Investiture of the Gods tribulation, if Long Ears Dingguang Immortal really waved the banner, he dared not say that Jie sect would definitely win, but it was still unknown who would win. However, as a forbidden treasure, the Six-Soul Banner could not be used casually. Every time the banner was waved, part of the holder's primordial spirit would be devoured by the resentment of the 3,000 demon gods. In the last battle of Jie sect, the 10,000 Immortals formation was their trump card. The participants could be said to have a slim chance of survival. However, those who waved the Six-Soul Banner would definitely die. Moreover, their primordial spirit would be devoured and they could not even enter the reincarnation cycle. Unless a saint paid a great price to reconstruct their true spirit, only then could they enter the reincarnation cycle. Although Long Ears Dingguang Immortal's escape had caused Jie sect to suffer, his escape was not purely because he was afraid of death. What was more terrifying than death was having one's soul dispersed and not entering the reincarnation cycle. Jie sect? TSK. Taoist Red Cloud shook his head. His face was gloomy as he said coldly, "They're all difficult to deal with. However, I don't know if this kid had obtained a fragment of the Six-Soul Banner by chance or if it was a spark that Tongtian sect master had placed in another world in advance because he knew that he could not suppress the fate of Jie sect." Although the blood-red banner in Yang Qinglin's hand was only a fragment of the Six-Soul Banner, it was definitely an invincible existence in the current Tianwu world. If Yang Qinglin was really angered, he could wave the Six-Soul Banner and exchange a life for a life. Even Taoist Red Cloud would be wiped out directly. Then Luo Yu seemed to have thought of something as his eyelids twitched violently. Taoist Red Cloud raised his right hand and stopped Luo Yu from speaking. He said indifferently, "Although we don't have a good relationship with the Black Jiao, the Black Jiao had borrowed the name of the demon court. Today we saved his life. This karma has already been set. Even if we don't do anything now, if the Heavenly Tao wants to get rid of us in the future, he will have to protect us." At this point, Taoist Red Cloud took back the 99 soul-dissipating gourd that was hovering above his head and hung it on his waist again. His eyes shone brightly as he turned to the east and said in a deep voice, "After the northern frontier recuperates, the black jiaos lay out in the south and the endless sea will be set. The mortal world will usher in a great reshuffle. When the time comes, the world will change and a batch of those who do nothing can be cleaned up." Luo Yu opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Taoist Red Cloud added, "The Black Jiao did not accept the King of Hell's throne today because he has not accumulated enough power for the time being. Do you really think that this world can enjoy peace forever?" Chapter 908. Taoist Red Cloud clasped his hands behind his back as if he had seen through the river of time. He said with great certainty, "When the Black Jiao becomes powerful, not only will the will of this world want him to accept the position of Yama, he himself will not miss such an opportunity. At that time, the only difference for us will be whether the primitive sage enters the sky martial arts, or the Black Jiao takes the initiative to lead the underworld and merge the sky martial arts into the untainted land. Then, like Luoho, he will fight with that person again. I'm just worried that the Black Jiao has entered the tribe of Jierism. You know, he is not a human now, nor does he have congenital qi. But he came from the afterlife formed by the original fragment of the heavenly way," Luo Yu added in a muffled voice. The bloody battle between the tribe of Jierism and the tribe of Chan was the battle between Zhou and Shang. Shen Gongbao, a disciple of the tribe of Jierism, entered Zhaoge as the national master and recruited Taoist friends to help the Yinshang judge the rebels of Shiqi. The last king of the Yinshang was called the emperor after the Zhou dynasty. At that time, the heavenly way had been stolen by Hongjun. Therefore, the four sages of the three religious sects fought with the Tongtian hierarch not because the tribe of Jierism was indiscriminate, but because Hongjun could not tolerate the existence of the human king. Coincidentally, in Lin Yuan's original world, there were no immortals, Buddhas, nor the emperor. After all, it was a world ruled by the human king. In a sense, Lin Yuan and the tribe of Jierism were indeed fated, and it was not the same kind of fate as the Western religious sect. As soon as he finished speaking, Taoist Red Cloud fell silent. Before Yang Qinglin showed the six-soul banner, they would not have such concerns. After all, the tribe of Jierism was a thing of the past. The tribulation taker had either joined other sects or entered the list of deification and became enslaved. But Yang Qinglin probably had some relationship with the tribe of Jierism. Otherwise, he would not have been able to get a fragment of the six-soul banner. Such a variable appeared beside Lin Yuan. If they continued to be indifferent and let the tribe of Jierism take Lin Yuan under their banner, it would be a big joke. I'll go talk to that person. You stay at the northern frontier and keep an eye on him. If he makes any strange movements, you know what to do." Taoist Red Cloud snorted. He swung his blood-red sleeves and said coldly, "No matter how powerful the Jie school is, I don't believe that the disciples of the Jie school in this world can set up a 10,000 immortals formation to kill us. Outside the endless space-time, in the untainted world, an old man in a snow-white robe was sitting cross-legged on a barren cliff. He suddenly opened his eyes and thousands of illusions flickered in his eyes. After a while, the old man stroked his beard and smiled, "Old friend, congratulations on coming out of seclusion." A cold light suddenly appeared in the sky. A handsome young man in a gray robe stood above the clouds. He held a red gourd in his right hand and looked at the old man in white. The corner of the young man's mouth kept rising. Not long after, he laughed and said, "During the God investiture tribulation, you plotted against me. If it weren't for the protection of the treasure, I wouldn't have seen the day of your tribulation. If you don't come out of seclusion today, I'm afraid you'll forget about me, right? Hongjun, your death is coming." Hongjun was still stroking his beard and smiling. It seemed that he had no intention of refuting the other party. The young man in a gray robe was also smiling. The shadow slowly dissipated and escaped into nothingness. No trace of him could be found. Hongjun's face turned cold. He slowly raised his right hand. His whole palm was smooth and white, without any wrinkles. It was a great contrast to his old appearance. Hongjun didn't do anything. He just gently waved his hand and an old man in a red robe was pinched in his hand. His black and white eyes fell on the old man's face. He didn't say anything and just stared at the old man coldly. The old man laughed dryly. His wrinkled face was full of flattery smile. He said resentfully, "Tao ancestor, please don't be angry. Tao ancestor, please don't be angry. It's not that I'm going easy on you. It's just that you know that thing has been running all over the world these years and has set up many spies. Now it has joined forces with a group of traitors who escaped from the untainted land. Its power is growing day by day. It's not difficult to find them, but to find exactly what you want, it can't be rushed at all. It can only be done slowly. It's all fate, all fate. 3 days. Hongjun set a time limit indifferently. Then he released his right hand and flicked his sleeve. He said expressionlessly, "It'll you find that kid in 3 days, and I'll give you a wisp of Hong Meng purple chi to help you become a saint. From then on, you can be free from the control of the Western sect. Otherwise, I'll personally peel you out of the Netherblood Sea 3 days later and use the divine fire of 6 to refine your primordial spirit for 10,000 years." The old man opened his mouth with a bitter face. However, before he could speak, Hongjuan's figure had already turned into clouds and dissipated. 3 days in the untainted land was not short. In the small world that existed with the untainted land as the foundation, it was from 1 to 3 years. If it was out of the untainted land and placed in other worlds, the conversion would be more complicated. It could be short or long. He had once seen a small world. 10,000 years in it was equivalent to 1 day in the untainted land. However, even so, he did not have the slightest confidence in the task that Hongjun had given him. There were countless small and big worlds that existed with the untainted land, and there were even more small and big worlds that were created on their own. Not to mention that he was not a saint. Even if he had the saint fruit, it was impossible for him to thoroughly search these small and big worlds under the nose of the fragment of the heavenly Tao. Not to mention, the task that Hongjun had given him this time was not to find the people in those worlds who had been chosen by the fragment of the heavenly Tao. Instead, it was to accurately search for an individual. This was because not long ago, a major event that shocked the entire untainted land had happened. The Tao ancestor Hongjuan's death trial had appeared. Hongjun joined forces with the 6 sages to deduce this matter, but they still only saw a fog. Even if Hongjun took out the jade plate of good fortune and even borrowed part of the power of the heavenly Tao, he could only deduce that the target was related to the dragon tribe. Not long after, the untainted land was in chaos. Various forces attacked the dragon tribe. Since the dragon tribe's vitality had been greatly damaged after the initial tribulation of the Dragon Han dynasty, they were almost exterminated in this turmoil. The powerful figures either died or were sealed. Only some of the descendants who had not yet matured were left alive. After all, the karma of exterminating a tribe was too great. Even someone as strong as Hongjun was not willing to be contaminated. However, what was even more strange was that even though the dragon tribe had suffered such a disaster, Hongjuan's death trial did not show any signs of dissipating. Instead, it became even more intense. Hongjun then deduced that this death trial came from the world outside the untainted land. Therefore, all the powerful figures who were responsible for searching, cultivation methods, and other worlds that were not ruled by the untainted land were all given similar orders. In particular, the Nether River ancestor, who had enlightened countless grievances floating in the Netherblood Sea, was a powerful figure who had invaded all the worlds for the Sky Demon. Hongjun had high hopes for him. Chapter 909. 4 hours later. Shunning City, Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion. Lin Yuan, who was not much bigger than a small snake, was coiled up on a soft cushion. His different-colored eyes flashed as his cold gaze swept across the familiar and unfamiliar faces. Just as he was about to open his mouth to speak, he suddenly felt a sudden impulse. The depths of his sea of consciousness seemed to be enveloped by a cold current, instantly covering his entire body. Danger. Extreme danger. Ever since Lin Yuan was born in this world, he had never felt such a strong sense of danger. It was different from the chill he felt when he was being stared at by other monsters in the Hengduan Mountains. It was more like, the next moment, the sky would collapse and the earth would cave in. Lin Yuan believed in his intuition very much because this sense of crisis had saved him countless times. Therefore, at this moment, Lin Yuan also closed his eyes. His divine sense was constantly rolling in the unseen world, looking for the source of this unknown crisis, but he still found nothing. Lord Dragon King. A soft call awakened Lin Yuan from his meditative state. Lin Yuan opened his eyes and saw Li Zhong dressed in black armor. After not seeing him for a while, Li Zhong's scholarly aura had faded a lot, especially during this period of time when the Sky Demon was invading the north. Although Li Zhong was not on the front lines, he stayed in the army camp day and night, eating and living with the soldiers. His body looked much stronger, and there was a hint of killing intent in his eyes. Lin Yuan nodded slightly, trying his best to suppress the uneasiness in his heart. He said in a low voice, "What is the current situation of the northern frontier? Tell me in detail." Although he had asked the same question previously, but that information had come from Lei Fan after all. Even though he couldn't say that it was all fabricated by Lei Fan, he was sure that it wouldn't be as detailed as what Li Zhong knew, and it wouldn't be as credible as what he had heard from Li Zhong himself. This subordinate is incompetent. I've used almost all of the trump cards you've left behind in order to withstand the onslaught of the heavenly demons. Fortunately, the things you've prepared beforehand are extremely effective against the heavenly demons. The Wei River battlefront is now impregnable. However, your subordinate was overconfident and tried to block the Sky Demon's side on the other side of the Wei River to prevent them from causing chaos in the northern frontier. But I did not expect to suffer a great defeat. Not only did I lose a lot of men, even old Marshal Yan Xingqi was caught in the Sky Demon's attack. Please punish me, Dragon King. Also, I heard that there was an empress in the south of the Shenwu dynasty. Her name is Guan Zhaoshan. Although she has disappeared, your subordinate is sure that she is not an ordinary person. In the past 20 years, the most talented person I have seen is you, Dragon King, and the other is the Empress in the south. Both of them rose to power as ordinary people and grew rapidly in a short period of time, becoming powerful people who could command the wind and the clouds. Other than her talent, this woman is also very scheming. She used the Red Dust Society to stir up the entire southern green forest. She used force to subdue them, enticing them with benefits. She used all kinds of methods to gain control of the entire southern green forest. She uprooted all the forces that did not submit to her and set up rules to unite the forces of the southern green forest to fight against the demon sect. With the help of the Ether Society, she formed the Great Alliance of the Southern Cultivation World. Now, the demon sect is on the brink of destruction. Due to the changes in the south, the Sky Demon had no choice but to give up on the plan to continue moving north. He only left a portion of his troops to continue confronting us, while the main force moved south at top speed. Your subordinate guesses that they either do not wish for the demon sect to be destroyed, or they want to take advantage of the conflict between the snipe and the clam to reap the benefits. It will be very difficult for them to move north to attack us in the near future. Also, this Guan Zhaoshan, according to the secret treasure of the embroidered uniform guard, it is said that she has used the safe house more than once and has the backing of the Ether Society. However, looking through the embroidered uniform guard roster, I have never seen the name Guan Zhaoshan. Thus, your subordinate guesses that this woman is most likely one of Zhang Xiu's people. When the Dragon King returns north, if he has the time, he can go south and bring this woman back. Such a talent should not be destroyed in the war in the south. Zhang Xiu cupped his hands in salute to Lin Yuan. His expression was somewhat gloomy as he added, "We suffered a great defeat before. Now, your subordinate knows that the Sky Demon's main force has moved south, but I still can't make up my mind. I don't know if I should go south and annex the Central Plains or sit on the northern frontier and continue to observe." Empress? A trace of obvious doubt appeared in Lin Yuan's eyes. He had indeed used some means to integrate the southern green forest and set up the rule of 2 kill 2 die. He also wanted to use the southern green forest to stir up the flames of war between the demon sect and the southern cultivation world. However, after doing the groundwork, Lin Yuan had put aside the matters there and returned to his main body in the endless sea to fight against the old rulers. He did not pay attention to the subsequent developments. But now it seemed, the situation in the south seemed to be more favorable than he had imagined. But the problem was, who was the empress? Cough. Clearing his throat, Lin Yuan threw away the distracting thoughts in his mind and said in a deep voice, Guan Zhaoxin is not one of Zhang Xiu's people. Forget it, I know what to do. You don't have to pay attention to this person anymore. However, you can send a message to our spies in the south. If Guan Zhaoxin asks, they must help her at all costs. After giving a simple explanation, Lin Yuan sat up again and said with a faint smile, But what you have to report to me now shouldn't be just this, right? If the northern frontier was just a problem with the Sky Demon, it wouldn't be like this now. Sorry, Dragon King, there are too many things to report. I haven't finished yet, and you came back too suddenly. As a Heaven Dipper realm cultivator who was immune to cold and heat, Li Zhong couldn't help but shiver when facing Lin Yuan. He said carefully, So, I can only say what I think and try to pick the important things to tell you. Otherwise, Dragon King, please allow me to leave for a while and organize a written report before reporting to you, Dragon King? If it was peacetime, Li Zhong would be able to deal with it in an orderly manner even if there were major issues in various places. However, the northern frontier was currently at war with the Immortals. They had to support the monsters in the Stonetalan forest and their allies. The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce also had to continue operating. Going south, they had to confront the Sky Demon. Donglin City was building a great wall to guard against the Frost Mirror barbarian attacks at all times. On the other side of the Wei River, they had to station troops to guard against the Azure River Empire's army or the subordinates of the Southern Wasteland's great monster Venerables sneaking into the northern frontier. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were enemies of the entire world. During this period of time, Li Zhong had been staying in the military camp. He only had the energy to solve one problem after another and assign suitable people to suitable positions. He didn't have the time to deal with these written problems, nor did he have the time to categorize, organize, and record them according to the timeline. When Lin Yuan asked, he did seem to be a little flustered. Chapter 9-10. The Sky Demon's move to the south is a foregone conclusion. This is within my expectations, so there's no need to go into detail. What I want to hear is the recent situation of the northern frontier. For example, the territories that are still under our control, the recent personnel changes in the various departments, and so on. Seeing Li Zhong's frown, Lin Yuan pondered for a moment, and then indifferently skipped the matter. The recent situation of the northern frontier is still fine. When we first discovered the Undyings, their numbers weren't many. However, it was different from the current Undyings. At that time, the Undyings all had spiritual intelligence and were much more difficult to deal with than the current Undyings. We originally planned to capture a group of them, but not long after, the Undyings suddenly used some spies from the Restoration North Society to create chaos in Shunning City. They took advantage of the chaos to attack our northern frontier's Ministry of Works. Although the Ministry of Works relied on their strong city walls and sharp weapons to block the Undyings outside the secret areas until reinforcements arrived, those Undyings that were captured by us were all rescued. After that, the Shifter Emperor tried his best to track them down, but he lost track of the Undyings near the Hengduan Mountains. A period of time after that, the Hengduan Mountains underwent a strange change. We lost contact with the Stoneclaw Forest, and only a few shifter beasts managed to escape. However, they only managed to say that the Undyings and Inferno beasts were running amok in the Hengduan Mountains. All the tribes suffered heavy losses, and they couldn't escape due to the various human empires, so they could only struggle to survive. Not long after that, the Beast Lord Kirin fought with a mysterious expert in the Shifter Palace. Both sides fought for 3 days and 3 nights. At first, they were evenly matched, but then the Inferno beasts attacked en masse. The Beast Lord Kirin couldn't fight alone, so he had to retreat while fighting. Under the protection of 3 great Beast Lords, he barely escaped to Shunning City. By the time he escaped to Shunning City, Only the severely injured and unconscious beast Lord Kirin and the honed Ice Wolf King had one of his legs chopped off were left. It was said that the Sacred Heart Ape King had fallen, and the colorful Snake Queen had led her troops to bring up the rear. There hasn't been any news about the Hengduan mountain range. Moreover, the Association of the Demon Emperor, the Imperial Secret Service, and the MI7 had sent many spies into the Hengduan mountain range. However, the strange thing was that none of the spies who went in came out alive. The caravans from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce were able to pass through the Hengduan mountain range smoothly. They had a lot of goods and profits, but their memories seemed to have been erased by someone. We tried all kinds of methods, but we couldn't get any information about the Hengduan mountain range. If the Sky Demon hadn't invaded the Northern Territory, I would have personally led a team to the Hengduan mountain range. Li Zhong cupped his fists. It seemed that the silence from before had cleared up his thoughts, and his speech had started to become smoother. The first undying beings had spiritual intelligence? This was not possible. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes, and he started to think carefully. There were many names for the undying beings, but in the end, there were only 3 types of undying beings: corpse, bone, and soul. In his previous life, there was a theory about the conservation of energy in the Western world. In ancient China, there was also a theory that no matter how many changes there were, they would still remain the same. This theory could be applied to everything. In his previous life, there were people who practiced evil arts, but the most powerful was to combine the 2 or the 3 into one. However, the essence would not change. After a living being died, if it wasn't in a place with dense yin qi, the corpse would rot and return to the earth. If it wasn't, the corpse would become a zombie. However, no matter how dense the yin qi was, once a living being died, the soul would be taken away. If there was a netherworld, then there would be reapers. If there wasn't a netherworld, then there would be the heavenly Tao. Therefore, even if a corpse became a zombie, it would have no soul and no memory of the previous life. Without a soul, it would be a walking corpse, no different from an ordinary beast. Now, the undying beings in the northern frontier were like this. This was common sense. Of course, it didn't mean that the undying beings couldn't develop spiritual intelligence. It was just that during the period when they just became undying beings, they had no memory, and their spiritual intelligence was like that of wild beasts. Coupled with their desire for flesh and blood and their hatred for living beings, it meant that they were destined to be with other undying beings with low spiritual intelligence. If they wanted to develop enough spiritual intelligence, unless there was a powerful undying being to guide them, they could only accumulate over time, become stronger little by little, and develop new spiritual intelligence. Want to have the memories and spiritual intelligence of the previous life as soon as a corpse was raised? It was not impossible. If a father as strong as the Yellow Emperor could also hide from the heavenly Tao and refine a living person into a drought demon, except for the appearance, everything else would be no different from when they were alive. This was because this type of undying beings was the combination of corpse, bone, and soul. They were extremely powerful once they were born, but the conditions to create them were also extremely difficult. Even if they existed, they were basically nurtured by the heavens and earth. Those heaven and earth spiritual treasures that combined the 3 types of undying beings were extremely difficult to find. In a world like the Sky Martial Continent, it might not be possible to gather all of them. Furthermore, this world was extremely xenophobic and didn't trust existences that came from the other side of the gate of heaven. Once they appeared, they would be enemies. Hence, heaven and earth spiritual treasures that were produced in other worlds would rarely appear in the Sky Martial Continent. Su Yen was indeed not weak. He was a rogue cultivator who wasn't born as a guardian of the gate of heaven. No one knew where he got the opportunity to obtain the Void Realm cultivation method that almost 80% of the cultivators in the Sky Martial Continent dreamt of. He also found another way to become the god that the assassins worshipped. However, good luck and a strong foundation were 2 different things. Su Yen being able to create undying beings was already inconceivable to Lin Yuan. If it was said that Su Yen was able to create a large number of undying beings with spiritual intelligence, it would be a little inexplicable. Furthermore, No matter what, Lei Fan had died at the hands of Yang Qinglin's disciples. Since he had appeared in this situation, he must be one of the undying beings under Su Yan. But if that was the case, Lei Fan's strength would not be able to match up to the 3 types of undying beings. What kind of existence was the Eldritch world? Golden immortals were everywhere, and Daluo was as common as dogs. Even if it had gone through a few catastrophes, the power system of the Eldritch world was absolutely tyrannical. And in the era when Hanbo was born, although it was not as strong as the early Eldritch world, it was definitely comparable to the existence of a golden immortal. It couldn't be that the Void Realm was equivalent to the strength of a golden immortal, right? That would be the biggest joke in the world. Furthermore, how did the undying beings and the purgatory demonic beasts mix together? Although these 2 things had many similar characteristics, Lin Yuan had seen the purgatory demonic beasts before. They were not much different from the ordinary demonic beasts, except that they were more violent, ruthless, and had lower spiritual intelligence. But if they could control the hostility in their hearts, they would be no different from the ordinary demonic beasts. They could even develop and grow stronger under the eyes of the Beast Lord Kirin, and become a force that could easily move in the Hengduan Mountains. But no matter how well the undying beings hid, they would still be surrounded by the Death Qi or Yin Qi. As long as one was not blind, one could tell whether they were humans or ghosts. After that, did you see any of those undying beings with spiritual intelligence? Lin Yuan's heart moved and he turned his head to ask. Chapter 9:11. This is not the case. Li Zhong clasped his fists and shook his head after thinking carefully for a while. He said in a deep voice, the current Northern Frontier's immortals began to appear after the captives were rescued. Originally, there were only starving Ghost Forest and other places. Later, more and more refugees died in the hands of the immortals, and the death aura gradually spread. Some life-forbidden zones gradually appeared, and the number of immortals increased significantly. It seems that these immortals with spiritual wisdom were mostly dealt with, Lin Yuan muttered softly. During the period of the Northern Restoration Society's dormancy, these immortals should have already appeared, but they had spiritual wisdom no different from ordinary people. In addition, similar things had never appeared before. Even if they were seen, they would at most be regarded as being surrounded by death aura. After all, it was easy to accumulate death aura in places such as cemeteries, and there were professions such as gravediggers. There were more high-ranking officials and dignitaries in the south, and there were more gravediggers. People with death aura from the tombs were not rare. After fighting with the immortals in the northern frontier, he realized the difference between these existences. Therefore, when Su Yan stirred up the chaos in Shunning City, he had no other purpose. He just wanted to take away these immortals whose identities were exposed. Because their identities were exposed, they could not continue to lurk in the northern frontier with a well-developed intelligence network. He had to deal with them himself, and then he created these immortals in the northern frontier. So, was it a potion? Or something similar? Su Yan's strength was not weak, but the coverage of his priesthood was not much, especially those related to the underworld. If he did not rely on external objects, it was tantamount to a fool's dream to create immortals. That's troublesome. Lin Yuan muttered again, and his eyes flickered slightly. Immortals did not exist in the Tianwu continent in the past. It was only now that the world was complete that it was possible to create conditions conducive to the birth of immortals. But as long as Lin Yuan did not agree, not just anyone could steal the Underworld King's authority. Unless it was an existence like Hanba, who was originally related to immortals, then it was possible to transform low-level immortals through various means. Or, the other party was an existence who had thoroughly studied immortals, and could even use various spiritual objects to refine some pills and medicines that could transform living creatures into immortals. Behind Su Yan stood an existence with even more terrifying strength. He was merely the cannon fodder that charged forward after hearing the signal. But the mastermind behind this was not Hanba. It was just an incomplete small world. How could it accommodate so many great gods? What the hell are you doing? At the start, Lin Yuan thought that the one who transformed the northern frontier into the underworld was Hanba. In the end, through Lei Fan, he found out about Su Yen, and through the intelligence of the northern frontier, as well as part of his own analysis, he realized that there might be another mastermind behind Su Yen. Who knew if there were other almighty beings behind this mastermind? After the immortals that appeared at the beginning were rescued, they never appeared again. Then, have you ever caught those immortals that appeared earlier? Lin Yuan turned his head to look at Li Zhong. Li Zhong was silent for a moment, then gently shook his head and said in a deep voice, "At the beginning, we did indeed try to catch the immortals, but after handing them over to the Ministry of Works, they still could not research anything, and could not even find a way to kill them. It was only later that some folk remedies appeared, for example, using lychee wood to burn the immortals' corpses to ensure that they could not be revived again. So when we caught the immortals later on, we basically got rid of them directly, and did not leave them in the area under our control to prevent any unforeseen circumstances." Folk remedies. This is interesting and very meticulous. Lin Yuan gently chewed on the words folk remedies, his eyes narrowing. Using lychee wood to burn the corpses could ensure that the corpses would not be revived. This method was used by the Maoshan Taoist priests to deal with zombies during the Republic of China in his previous life. This method could not be a folk remedy. Either there was a Taoist tradition from the previous life that had spread to this world, but this tradition had gradually declined to the point where it could only be hidden among the people, or this method of dealing with the immortals came from the person who created the immortals. He wanted the northern frontier to get rid of all the immortals that they caught, so as to block the possibility of Lin Yuan finding anything from those immortals, and the latter was more likely. After all, the three sects of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism were the supreme Taoist traditions from the previous life. Although there were also three sects of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism in this world, the difference between the Abhijna, Taoism, and Confucianism of the two sects was not small. If there was really a Taoist tradition from the previous life, even if it was the Maoshan Taoism in the Age of Chaos, it would not be inferior to those super sects in this world for more than 100 years. This was the difference in foundation. They should be destroying the corpses. Li Zhong, mobilize all the spies of the Association of the Demon Emperor and investigate this matter in detail. I want to know who these so-called folk remedies came from. In addition, when I came back, I saw many idle warriors and mercenaries hunting the immortals outside the city. Prepare a copy of the information of these people, especially those who did this at the beginning. Don't miss out on any of them. Lin Yuan's lips curled up slightly and he sneered, "You want to destroy the corpses, but this is the truth. When you tell a lie, you have to make up for it with countless lies. When there are more and more such lies, the flaws will become bigger and bigger." "I understand." Li Zhong bowed slightly. His brain was not slow. Although his knowledge and experience were not as good as Lin Yuan's, he could still guess most of it. For example, Lin Yuan asked if there were any captives of the immortals because he wanted to find something from the immortals. And those so-called folk remedies were not as simple as he thought at the beginning. The purpose of these folk remedies was to get rid of the captured immortals, so as to prevent Lin Yuan from getting what he wanted from them. Therefore, the people who invented these folk remedies did not have good intentions from the beginning, and the people who spared no effort to promote this matter were probably not clean. A matter that originally seemed to be very good, after adding complicated thoughts, instantly became dangerous and sinister. One of the 50 heavenly Tao had escaped. Only the human heart could only increase and not decrease. "Liexin, I'll leave this matter to you." Li Zhong turned his head, his eyes falling on a young man wearing a black official uniform of the northern frontier, and whispered. The young man looked 70% similar to Li Zhong, but his temperament was completely different. Li Zhong was similar to a romantic scholar, always carrying a faint scholarly aura, but this young man was like a block of ice, constantly emitting an indifferent aura that kept strangers away. Chapter 9:12. Li Exin bowed expressionlessly, turned around, and picked up a folder beside his feet. He said in a deep voice, "I've checked. The people who came up with the folk prescription are all villagers. The prescription was given to them by someone else, and they were even given a sum of money to spread it to the cities in the northern frontier. However, the people who came up with the folk prescription must have used illusionary techniques to disguise themselves. I've asked many people, and even the people in a village said that those people looked different when they saw them. At this point, he paused, then squinted his eyes and said, although the Sky Demon's attack left all parties short of manpower, the Association of the Demon Emperors set up some guard stations and outposts in the countryside when they transformed. The purpose was to monitor these people who were playing tricks in the dark. However, there was no useful information in those outposts. The Dragon King had previously passed down a secret technique called the illusionary spirit pupil. As long as the two parties' realms are not more than 3 realms apart, any illusionary techniques or disguise will be ineffective. It is a compulsory course for the trainees of the 3 intelligence divisions in the northern frontier. Then, Li Zhong was stunned and looked at Li Exin with some surprise. It seemed that he did not expect his younger brother to be able to investigate this step under his nose. As far as I know, no matter if it is the northern frontier or the surrounding areas, there is only one secret technique that can fool the illusionary spirit pupil. That is, the 9-tailed phantom from the Hengduan Mountains. It is a secret technique of the Fox clan's bloodline. Moreover, those who have mastered this technique are basically people with strong bloodlines. Even if they are not the clan leaders, they are at least saintesses or saintesses. Li Exin still had a straight face and continued, however, it is meaningless to suspect the Fox clan because of this. Even if it is a human, if he obtains the corpse of this kind of Fox clan member, he can perform the 9-tailed phantom 1 to 3 times. It can only be said that this is a theory. In addition, there is no way to enter the Hengduan Mountains to investigate this matter, so my investigation ends here. Lin Yuan sneered and turned to look at Li Exin. He said indifferently, you told me so confidently that this clue is broken, but you did not mention the other clue. This means that you have already found useful information. Speak, what do you want? Li Exin's expression changed slightly. Just as he opened his mouth, he was interrupted by a low roar. How dare you? Li Zhong stood up straight and quickly walked in front of Li Exin. He raised his right hand and slapped Li Exin in the face. After all, the difference in cultivation between the brothers was obvious. Li Exin didn't even have time to react before he was slapped to the ground by Li Zhong. The files in his hands were scattered all over the ground. Taking a deep breath and calming himself down, Li Zhong said with a cold face, Li Exin, let me remind you that all the information you have now is based on the power of the 3 intelligence divisions of the northern frontier. Even if you personally investigated some of the information, it's not difficult to reverse engineer the information. Therefore, you can't hide from us what we want to know. Since you said this yourself, the Dragon King will remember your contribution. But if you want to ask for something, if you want to die, just say it. Li Exin didn't say anything. He just sat in the middle of the scattered files and stared unblinkingly at Lin Yuan. Li Zhong's expression changed slightly. He raised his hand again and was about to continue slapping. Li Zhong. Lin Yuan's voice was very calm, but Li Zhong trembled slightly. His raised right hand also froze in midair. Li Zhong was now under Lin Yuan's command. He was definitely a veteran, so he understood Lin Yuan's personality more thoroughly. To Lin Yuan, character, reputation, and family background didn't matter. He only cared about ability. There was only one rule in the northern frontier officialdom: the capable went up, the mediocre stepped aside, and the mediocre went down. Trash didn't have any value in existing. Li Exin was able to discover the problem with folk remedies before him and investigate the matter in depth. Moreover, he already had results. This was already proof of his ability. As long as Li Exin honestly told him what he knew, he would naturally receive the rewards he deserved. After a period of experience, climbing to a high position would be a simple matter. But now, Li Exin's words were stuck here. It was obvious that he wanted to use this to get something from Lin Yuan. But this undoubtedly touched Lin Yuan's bottom line. With Lin Yuan's way of ruling, he could bestow all authority and honor to Li Zhong. Even if the people of the northern frontier worshipped Li Zhong and still cursed Lin Yuan as a demon, he didn't care. However, he also casually crushed the 2 previous kings of the northern frontier. This was because everything Li Zhong had wasn't obtained through fighting. It was given to him personally by Lin Yuan. If Li Zhong wanted to fight for things that didn't belong to him, his end wouldn't be much better. The best outcome would be being imprisoned for life. After all, it was his younger brother who had touched the Dragon King's bottom line. Li Zhong's reaction was extremely fast. His goal was to force his younger brother to admit defeat before Lin Yuan, and use this to save Li Xian's life. It was just that he didn't expect his younger brother to be so stubborn. And the Dragon King had already spoken. He was afraid no one would be able to save his younger brother. This should be the first time we've met. I don't know how Li Zhong usually describes me to you, but you are a capable and thoughtful person. So from the things I've done in the past, you should be able to infer what my way of ruling is like. But since you've spoken, I don't mind your offense. Whatever you want, I can satisfy you. Even if you want to sit in Li Zhong's position, it's just a matter of a word to me. At this point, Lin Yuan paused and looked meaningfully at Li Xian. He joked, but you have to think carefully. If you can't complete the task you want, death to you will become a relief. After he finished speaking, Li Xian slowly stood up from the ground. He reached out and patted the dust off his body. He said calmly, I can't interfere with the MI7, but you have to choose between the embroidered uniform guards and the association of the Demon Emperor for me. I've traveled to the various empires over the years, and I can be sure that none of the empire's intelligence agencies are as perfect as the Northern Frontiers. It's only a matter of time before the Northern Frontier's eyes and ears spread all over the continent. But this bunch of good-for-nothings from the Northern Frontier only know how to scheme against each other and even drag their own people down. It's irritating to see them. Agreed. Then, continue with the information you've gathered. I hope your information is worth the position you want. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and retracted his gaze. Although Li Zhong's expression was calm, if one looked closely, it wasn't hard to see that Li Zhong was trembling at this moment, as if he was extremely angry. Chapter 9:13. Actually, it's nothing. Whether it's the Northern Restoration Society or the chaos in Shunning City, it all boils down to the word ghost. Previously, the Sky Demon used the elixir of immortality to harm the Northern Frontier. Although we've managed to clean up a lot of them during this period of time, there are always a few that slipped through the net. Although the protective umbrella that the Sky Demon built in the Northern Frontier was damaged, it was still barely usable. After that, everything that happened in the Northern Frontier was actually based on this damaged protective umbrella. Someone took advantage of the absence of the Dragon King to take over this protective umbrella and contacted the Sky Demon. Then he secretly transferred a batch of the elixir of immortality. Thus, he hid those that slipped through the net and continued to develop and strengthen. He even began to recruit some non-staff members, which was the embryonic form of the Northern Restoration Society. Looking at the Northern Frontier, there weren't many people who had the ability to do this, especially after Sherdong, Su Nan, and the others were captured one after another. Only Luo Su and Li Zhong might be able to do this. After all, going east, that guy surnamed Zhang wasn't someone to be trifled with, and he was wholeheartedly loyal to the Northern Frontier. In other words, he hated the Shuangjian dynasty. Only on the Northern Frontier could he have a stage to develop his talent. If he wanted to send the elixir of immortality to the Northern Frontier without his knowledge, most people might not be able to do it even if they risked their lives. Thus, following this train of thought, I secretly investigated Li Zhong and Luo Su. On the surface, these two seemed to be more honest, but no matter how well Luo Su disguised himself, he still exposed a flaw. Li Xian stretched out his hand and rubbed his swollen cheek that Li Zhong had slapped. He said indifferently, the Blackwater Army, the Falling Star Army, and part of the Southern Expedition set up camps at the source of the Wei River as the first line of defense against the Sky Demon. To be honest, this was a bad idea, but it couldn't be helped. After all, we had to test the actual combat power of the Sky Demon Corps before we could allocate troops and equipment to the various lines of defense. But he should never have agreed to the plan of counterattacking the Sky Demon. What he shouldn't have done even more was that he did a lot of tricks, which allowed me to lock onto him instead of continuing to suspect him and Li Zhong of who the traitor was. It saved me a lot of time. Li Zhong shook his head and interrupted Li Exin. He said with certainty, he did it on purpose, because at that time, everything he had set up in the northern frontier was almost complete. Whether he exposed himself or not was meaningless. At that time, it could even be said that he exposed himself. His purpose was to make us focus our attention on him. The immortals also appeared not long after that. The connection with the Hengduan Mountains was also broken at that time. He reached out his hand to cover half of our eyes, making us ignore some things that we should have seen. Interesting. Lin Yuan didn't open his mouth to interrupt the Li brothers, but his gaze became meaningful. Luo Su's loyalty to him originated from the existence of Mara, who could suppress the purgatory fire in him. This was never true loyalty, but it was the most trustworthy loyalty. But ever since he met Lei Fan, Lin Yuan was no longer surprised by Luo Su's betrayal in his heart. Luo Su was picked up by Lei Fan near the destroyed Zhongshan city. Even if the two of them had some relationship that outsiders didn't know, it was normal for people's hearts to change easily. Especially after experiencing a natural disaster, people's hearts would become more and more fickle. A refugee with an unknown identity suddenly became Lei Fan's aide. Lin Yuan would never believe that there wasn't any deal or checks and balances involved. No matter what Luo Su did, Lei Fan would definitely have prepared a set of methods to restrain Luo Su should he betray him. If it was in his previous life, it would have been something like planting a bomb in Luo Su's body. In the heavens martial world, some obscure secret arts or highly toxic pills could easily achieve this. Hence, it was hard to say whether Luo Su was loyal to Lei Fan or not. But if Lei Fan needed him, Luo Su would definitely become his most obedient subordinate. With Lei Fan dead, Luo Su would be a good knife in Lin Yuan's hands. He could control Sherdong and deter the various factions. But if Lei Fan wasn't dead, no matter how capable Luo Su was, Lin Yuan wouldn't entrust him with any important tasks. But Lin Yuan would never have thought that Su Yan, or rather, the person behind Su Yan, would have such great capabilities to snatch the confirmed dead Lei Fan out from the gates of hell and even turn him into an immortal. He even used him to instigate Luo Su and planted a bomb called the Restoration North Society by his side. But what Lin Yuan didn't expect was that Luo Su's ability was actually so strong. Except for Yi Busho, who wasn't part of the establishment and only took orders from Lin Yuan, the Association of the Demon Emperor, the Embroidered Uniform Guards, and the MI7 were now known as the three intelligence divisions. Except for the Association of the Demon Emperor, which had a mix of members, Lin Yuan actually had absolute control over more than 80% of the people in the Embroidered Uniform Guards and the MI7. But Luo Su was able to play the various intelligence agencies in the palm of his hand in such an environment. He even used the method of splitting up and giving out orders one by one, causing the agencies that were originally loyal to Lin Yuan to do things that were completely unfavorable to Lin Yuan. And before Luo Su exposed himself, he even kept it a secret from the various intelligence agencies. Even Lin Yuan didn't have any suspicions about him. After Luo Su exposed his identity as a mole, he used assassination and anti-tracking methods to get rid of a group of spies. Since then, we have completely lost all news of Luo Su. But in this way, without Luo Su as a shield, we have quickly found the remaining people under that shield and uprooted them. Even some people who were unsure whether they were involved, but who were indeed part of Luo Su's faction, have been arrested and sent to the Embroidered Uniform Guards prison to be strictly screened if they were involved. On the downside, the entire Northern Frontier's intelligence agencies, and even my stupid brother, have all been slapped in the face by Luo Su. It can even be said that we have been played in the palm of his hand. If this matter were to spread for a long time in the future, the Northern Frontier's intelligence agencies, which should have been unrivaled in the world, would become the laughing stock of others. But on the upside, our gains are equally huge. This time, we have suffered a loss and are prepared. Next time, we won't fall for the same trick. Not only did we manage to stop our losses in time, but we also thoroughly investigated the Northern Frontier and cleaned up a large number of spies and redundant officials. The entire Northern Frontier has been cleaned up. In the long run, this is excellent. At this time, Li Exen stood up slightly and said with a cold smile, "So now, as long as we find Luo Su, we will be able to know who is behind all this. I already have an idea about this matter. I just need authority, enough authority, because to do this, we may have to kill a large number of people." Chapter 9:14. You mean, other than the mole we found, there are other people in the northern frontier who are in contact with Luo Su? Lin Yuan looked at Li Exen and pondered for a moment before he slowly said, "I know what you want to do, but you have to think clearly. Once you do this, there will be no turning back. You will either become the next Luo Su or die in the revenge of some people. In public, I support you, but in private, if I agree, your brother will resent me. This is my own choice. What is there for him to resent?" Li Exen took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling slightly, and said resolutely, "A person's life should have some value. I have traveled and studied for so many years, but during this time in the northern frontier, I saw the word fairness. So I plan to stay in the northern frontier and show what I have learned." Speaking of retreating, Dragon King, you must be joking. From the moment I stood here and asked for your authority, I have no way out. If I want to retreat, my stupid brother will take the blame for me, won't he? As his voice fell, Lin Yuan and Li Zhong both lowered their heads, as if thinking about something. In fact, the two of them had the same thought at this moment. Fairness? What was fairness? In fact, these two words do not exist at all, and even Lin Yuan has to admit this point. For example, two people might not have much difference in aptitude, but the difference in family background would lead to two completely different lives. But could you blame this on others? Other people's fathers and ancestors had accumulated a great fortune for their descendants. What right did you have to not let them use it? Because you did not have such a family background? That kind of fairness was the real injustice. Therefore, although the northern frontier did not care about family background, it was only relative. Those who could climb to a high position in the northern frontier were actually from aristocratic families. Because the resources in their hands were different, the cultivation methods they practiced were different, and the private tutors they hired were also different. Even the foundation laid at a young age was like the difference between heaven and earth. Even if their aptitudes were the same, with the help of these external factors, the difference in their cultivation progress was like heaven and earth. The fairness that the Northern Territory pursued was nothing more than eliminating the real foppish from a group of foppish people and leaving behind the talents that could be cultivated. Then, a portion of these barely salvageable talents would be trained together with the grassroots who were good enough to make up for the gap between them and some external factors. After graduation, they would be placed in different positions according to their different abilities and conduct. This was indeed not something to be praised. Because at the end of the day, Lin Yuan did not seem to have changed anything. The aristocratic families were still at the top. It was just that the capable descendants of the aristocratic families had replaced the foppish sons whose bloodline was close to the main bloodline. Now that they were praised by Li Exen like this, both Lin Yuan and Li Zhong felt a little embarrassed. Of course, when he said this, Li Exen's gaze was also a little erratic. It was obvious that he did not mean what he said. No matter what, the Northern Frontier's concept of the capable go up, the mediocre step aside, and the mediocre step down was true. In the Northern Frontier, no matter whether it was honest or cunning, as long as one could do good things and had enough ability to deal with any unexpected situation, one would be able to climb to a high position in time. It was much better than the other dynasties that relied on family background, connections, and experience. For people like the Li brothers who had enough ability and confidence in themselves, the Northern Frontier was undoubtedly a fatal attraction. It was just that these words were not easy to say. After all, if these words were spoken, the world would say that those who held high positions in the Northern Frontier were outstanding. But on second thought, wouldn't that mean that the rest of the people in the Northern Frontier were all mediocre and mediocre? It may not sound nice to say this, but I hope that you can replace Luo Su and become the craziest dog and the fastest knife in the Northern Frontier. Before anyone wants to do anything to the Northern Frontier, you have to react immediately. As for the specific measures, you can decide for yourself. My personal opinion is that the embroidered uniform guard will either not appear, or if they do, they will go for the extermination of the whole family. Lin Yuan curled up his body and avoided the topic of Li Exen lying through his teeth. He said in a deep voice, "Of course, if you don't want to, you can forget about the embroidered uniform guard. But you can still be the temporary president of the Association of the Demon Emperor. It's just that you will have much less authority." This is the problem that Sherdong and Luo Su left for the successor, who asked Sherdong to lose, right? 30 minutes later, teams of embroidered uniform guards in black armor and white robes led their men out of the prince's mansion in the northern frontier. They were silent all the way, but they walked with majestic strides. When they walked, they even put their right hand on the hilt of the saber at their waist, looking murderous. Shunning City used to be the most prosperous city in the northern frontier of the Shenwu dynasty. It was also the last line of defense of the Shenwu dynasty against the Hengduan Mountains. After it was occupied by Lin Yuan, it had been used as the capital of the northern frontier. Now that he had occupied the entire northern territory of the Shenwu dynasty, Shunning City did not need to continue to be the first line of defense. Naturally, it became more and more prosperous. To put it bluntly, after Lin Yuan had occupied the northern territory, Shunning City had become a delicious cake in the eyes of the big families in the northern frontier. In these years, except for the first batch of people who migrated to the northern frontier, those who could buy a house in Shunning City were the top aristocratic families in the northern cities. Although the aristocratic families referred to those who had been purged, if it were 5 years ago, these aristocratic families might not even be qualified to run errands for the real aristocratic families. They could be regarded as those who had benefited from Lin Yuan's independence. After these aristocratic families moved to Shunning City, they still followed their old habits to bribe the government offices. However, due to the special system of the northern frontier, they had little effect. Some of them even used too much force and attracted the attention of the embroidered uniform guards. Because of this, many families were broken into and destroyed. After the big wave of elimination, the remaining aristocratic families could be said to be as timid as mice, but they could also be said to be calm and steady. However, they all had one thing in common: they were well informed. The suspected existence of the Dragon King had returned to the northern frontier. Even the king of the northern frontier had been called back from the front line. This kind of news had caused a stir before Li Zhong met Lin Yuan. There were some small waves in the city, but generally speaking, everyone was still waiting for the news. But now, things were not out of their expectations. The Dragon King might have found out who had crossed the line again. Anyway, according to past experience, every time the king of the northern frontier made a big move, a lot of people would die. Sometimes it was the king of the northern frontier who died, but more often, it was the aristocratic families in the northern frontier who died. Chapter 9:15. East of Shunning City, in the mansion of the Zhao family. Shao Qi of the embroidered uniform guard shook the gray cloak behind him and sat on a chair that one of his subordinates had found. Then he used a piece of yellow silk cloth to wipe the blood on the blade while coldly sizing up Lord Zhao, who was kneeling 3 meters in front of him. He said with a smile, "Before we get to the point, I have to clean my blade." The blade of the embroidered uniform guard is handy, sharp, fast, and not light or heavy. However, it doesn't have a blood groove. If I don't clean the blood on the blade before putting it back in its sheath, it will be so rusty that it won't be able to be pulled out tomorrow morning. Old Master Zhao's eyes were lifeless, and his body was still trembling slightly. For a moment, he did not know what to do. In fact, he could not even tell if this embroidered uniform guard was threatening him or if he was just grumbling after killing someone. He would get to the main topic later. "Psst. Lord, I don't know what mistake my Zhao clan has committed. Why did it bring about such a calamity?" Lord Zhao didn't say anything, but the second young master of the Zhao family, who was also kneeling at the side, couldn't help but open his mouth. His eyes were full of resentment. Since the Zhao family was under the northern frontier, they had been living a stable life. They sent their servants to farm when they needed to. Occasionally, they would follow the northern frontier caravans on the trade route of the Hengduan mountain range to earn some quick money to maintain the family business. Their lives were not as carefree as before, but their income had increased by more than 10 times. There were more than 300 people in the Zhao family, and all of them were satisfied. The Zhao family had 7 sons in this generation, and 2 of them had even entered the Northern Frontier Academy. If there were no accidents, they would be people who would bring honor to their ancestors in the future. But now, it was impossible. The Zhao family was going to be gone. Puchi. A cold light flashed. Shao Qi of the embroidered uniform guard frowned and threw away the blood-stained silk cloth. He waved his hand and his subordinate passed him another piece. He then focused on wiping the long blade in his hand again, as if the one he had just killed was just a pig and not a living second young master of the Zhao family. The Zhao family had been destroyed overnight. The servants had all been killed. The second son had just died. Master Zhao raised his head and opened his mouth. However, no one knew if it was because he was frightened or if it was because he was mentally and physically exhausted that he didn't make a single sound. Shao Qi of the embroidered uniform guard raised his head and grinned at old Master Zhao. Not long ago, the embroidered uniform guard changed their commander. Today, we came out to greet you. After all, we still have a long way to go in the future. Also, without my permission, if anyone dares to say a word, I'll have his head. His voice was like a clap of thunder, making the faces of the Zhao family members turn pale. There were not many people on the northern frontier who did not know Luo Su. That ruthless and cruel commander of the embroidered uniform guards had done similar things when he was at his most arrogant. However, that was only when there was conclusive evidence that certain aristocratic families were guilty that he dared to act so arrogantly. But this new commander who replaced Luo Su, it was just a greeting, yet he killed so many people? And from the looks of it, the Zhao family wasn't the only unlucky one. The members of the Zhao family all secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. For a moment, they couldn't describe how vicious, cruel, and cunning the new commander was. Shao Qi of the embroidered uniform guard then stood up and patted old Master Zhao's face. The sinister smile on his face gradually faded and was replaced by a serious expression. He even clasped his fists and said, "Pass on Commander Li's order. You merchants did not listen to advice, did not respect the law, and did not register with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Instead, you followed the caravans of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and made a few trips to the Hengduan mountain range to take large amounts of wealth into your hands. It's not that the embroidered uniform guard didn't know about these things, it's just that they were too lazy to make a fuss about it. But now, the embroidered uniform guard wants to make a fuss about it." At this point, he reached out his hand and pinched old Master Zhao's chin. He said coldly, "I'll give you one last chance. Tell me everything you've seen and heard on this trip. Family? Extermination? Clinic? Sir, we really don't know about this." The fourth young master of the Zhao family narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "I'm a student of the Northern Frontier Academy. We've studied before and wanted to know what tricks our opponents played to be able to accurately distinguish the caravans from the spies. At the same time, we wanted to know what method they used to make those who had experienced the Hengduan mountain range become amnesiacs. We've always wanted to know what happened in the Hengduan mountain range. Now that you're asking us, we can't answer." When he said this, the fourth young master of the Zhao family obviously thought about it. Because he didn't hear Shao Qi of the embroidered uniform guard call him to speak, he revealed his identity as a student of the Northern Frontier Academy when he opened his mouth. He hoped that the other party would be afraid of this identity and not dare to make a move. However, swish. The cold blade flashed. When Shao Qi of the embroidered uniform guard started to wipe the blade again, the fourth young master of the Zhao family's headless body slowly lay in the corner. Obviously, the identity of a student of the Northern Frontier Academy was not very useful to the embroidered uniform guard. The embroidered uniform guard had the privilege of killing first and reporting later. If the embroidered uniform guard was provoked, unless the person's strength was extraordinary, the embroidered uniform guard would not hesitate to kill a student of the academy, even if the person was a teacher of the academy or a genius disciple on a certain list. If the embroidered uniform guard had such courage, what was the use of the privilege of killing first and reporting later? I've said it before. Before I allow you to speak, I'll cut off the head of whoever speaks. Shao Qi of the embroidered uniform guard's eyes grew fiercer. He said fiercely, "Master Zhao, our commander said that if you really don't want to tell us what happened, it doesn't matter. As long as you can borrow the heads of your entire family to intimidate those who know how to talk and cooperate with us, then I'll definitely return the heads to you." Master Zhao was speechless. What the hell do you mean by returning the heads to us? If you cut off the heads and sew them back when you're done with them, will we be able to live or what? Shao Qi of the embroidered uniform guard finished wiping the blade this time and did not hurry to put it away. Instead, he said slowly, "Master Zhao, what do you think?" Things similar to the Zhao family's mansion were happening everywhere in Shunning City at the moment. Not long after Lin Yuan's return, Shunning City, which had been peaceful for a long time, was once again filled with the pungent smell of blood. Headless corpses were dragged out and burned one after another. Heads were hung on flagpoles and carried around by people. From this moment on, everyone realized that the new commander of the Brocade Guards was no less ferocious than Luo Su. In fact, he was even more terrifying in some details. It was as if he had never thought of leaving a way out for others. Chapter 9:16. The aristocratic families in the northern frontier were like leeks. They were different from their counterparts in other places. Even if their family members really held high positions in the northern frontier or paid abundant taxes, they could not affect the situation in the northern frontier. There was an invisible line there. If you did not want to cross it and did something in private, everyone could pretend that they did not see it. But if anyone dared to cross that line, what followed would undoubtedly be a tragic extermination of the whole family. Li Xian ordered the embroidered uniform guards to kill in Shunning City, which naturally aroused the dissatisfaction of many people, especially those whose family members were studying in the Northern Frontier Academy or had graduated from the academy and worked in a government office. They even gathered outside the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, clamoring for an explanation from Li Zhong. Otherwise, they would not let it go. As for the so-called explanation, it was just that they hoped that Li Zhong would replace the commander of the embroidered uniform guards. Even if there was another existence like Luo Su, they would not necessarily be afraid. After all, although Luo Su's methods were a bit fierce, he still wanted to confirm that you were guilty, or that you were most likely related to the matter he wanted to investigate. Only then would he arrest and kill, and it would be fine if there was blood. But this new commander was different. He directly overturned a boat of people. Whether you knew it or not, as long as you were in his circle, then the embroidered uniform guards would definitely come to your door. Even if you did not see them for a while, don't think that you are safe. That was only because the embroidered uniform guards were busy dealing with the other aristocratic families and had not killed here. Li Zhong did not show up for these aristocratic families' actions, and Li Xian did not stand out to say a few words. But when the leading families were shouting happily, a group of embroidered uniform guards rushed over and pinned a pile of crimes on their heads. Without waiting for them to open their mouths to explain, they directly took out their sabers and slashed and killed. Therefore, in front of the prince's mansion in the northern frontier, the only place that was not tainted by the smell of blood, there were corpses with eyes open and pools of blood that gradually gathered into a small river. Although the embroidered uniform guards had the right to kill first and report later, they would not kill people for no reason. 8 or 9 out of 10 of those crimes were true. The only thing that was outrageous was that even the past of those aristocratic families had been dug out. Those were things that they had spent a large sum of money to bribe. Who would have thought that after a few years or more, those crimes that had been covered up would actually become the talismans that would hasten their deaths? Although everyone could tell that the embroidered uniform guards were deliberately looking for trouble, every time the embroidered uniform guards killed someone, they would loudly recite the evil deeds that person had done. It was also a form of demonstration. The commander who had mysteriously replaced Luo Su and took over the Brocade Guard was using this opportunity to send a message to the northern frontier. He was not Luo Su, who was uninterested in the past. If he wanted to, even if he did not like you, he could list 7 or 8 crimes against you. He could even go from killing a person to wiping out an entire family. To be honest, the northern frontier was originally a place of bitter cold. It was very normal for the people to be valiant. Just like the Nujinrin who had killed her way out of the White Mountains and Black Waters in the previous life, 20,000 people had defeated the great Liao army of 700,000. She had left behind a legend in the future. The Nujinrin was not a match for 10,000 people. It was not because the Nujinrin was strong, but because of her living environment. At that time, the Great Song had fallen because the Central Plains had been too comfortable. The Great Liao had also fallen because they had too much contact with the Great Song. They had indulged in pleasure and lost their courage. In fact, these 2 dynasties that had been destroyed by women, any one of them could create a similar legend with the Nujinrin. Although the northern frontier was not as difficult as the White Mountains and Black Waters, the ferocity of the monsters in the Hengduan Mountains was not comparable to the beasts that the Nujinrin had faced in the past. Therefore, in the northern frontier, even a mortal was much stronger and more ferocious than an ordinary mortal. In such a big environment, which person in the northern frontier dared to say that their buttocks were clean? Even if they thought that they had dealt with the aftermath properly and would not be found out, how many of those corpses lying in pools of blood had the same thought? In short, on the first day of his appointment, Li Xian had already set up his image. With Lin Yuan, Li Zhong, and a series of military forces in the northern frontier, even the aristocratic families and sects of the northern frontier in the past had to temporarily avoid the sharp edge, let alone the few big and small cats that had survived 2 or 3 purges. In the prince's mansion in the northern frontier, Lin Yuan glanced at the flags with heads hanging on them passing by the gate of the prince's mansion, and said with a smile, "Your brother and you are so different that I doubt whether you are twins. But this move is a bit cruel, but it is effective. In the future, if Commander Li wants to know something, he can just spread the word, and there will be plenty of people rushing to tell him. After all, if he doesn't say anything, the entire northern frontier will not be peaceful. Wave after wave of slaughter, no one can stand it." Speaking of this, Lin Yuan smiled and added in a low voice, "If he can't stand it, he will have to rise up. Not to mention the other armies, the Southern Battlefront Army alone is not something that any grasshead king can compete with. No matter what he chooses, he will die. If he doesn't want to die, he can only cooperate honestly. In the past, he could still play some tricks, but in the future, he will have to lower his head and live a life. So, even if there is a big secret, they can only tell us." Li Zhong also nodded thoughtfully and said in a low voice, "And just in case, if they reveal something we don't want to know, or something we already know, not only will they not get any benefits, but they will also make us unhappy. After killing another batch, if they want to talk, they will tell us everything they know." Because today, when he dug up the old accounts, he also warned them that as long as the brocade guard is willing, there is nothing they can't find out. If they lie, it will bring disaster to themselves and their families. Lin Yuan looked at Li Zhong with a strange expression. The Li brothers were really bad. Li Xian did have some tricks up his sleeves. Of the old accounts he dug up today, almost 40% were not the original files of the northern frontier, but the ones Li Xian found out bit by bit during this period of time. Obviously, although this person looked a little frivolous, in reality, he was a person who planned before acting. For the position of commander of the brocade guard, he must have done a lot of homework. It was estimated that, except for where Luo Su was hiding, Li Xian had figured out everything else. Those spies that Luo Su had planted in the northern frontier were most likely being monitored at this moment, waiting for Li Xian to close the net. Chapter 9:17. As he chatted with Li Zhong on and off, he watched as the embroidered uniform guards either left or returned after receiving their orders. On the other end of the universal scripture, there was a sudden change. "About that black Jiao coming back, why didn't you tell me?" This voice belonged to Luo Su. Compared to the state he was in when he was tortured by the flames of purgatory at the northern frontier, Luo Su was obviously much more energetic now, as if he had already gotten rid of the flames of purgatory that had been pestering him. It also seemed that after completing the series of arrangements at the northern frontier, some sort of restraint between Luo Su and Lei Fan had disappeared. At this moment, when Luo Su spoke to Lei Fan, his tone was obviously interrogative. Lei Fan's slightly languid voice then rang out, "Even if I told you, what could you do?" Luo Su, you have been at the northern frontier for such a long time, surely you wouldn't be so naive to think that those who could make a name for themselves in the northern frontier are all easy to deal with, right? There was a moment of silence between the two of them before Lei Fan said slowly, "I know that you are feeling sorry for the trap that you had painstakingly set up, but before you could fully unleash it, it was almost wiped out by that new embroidered uniform guard commander. But the problem is, when you first escaped, did you not think that this day would come sooner or later? Or perhaps, you already knew about it in advance. If you were not prepared, then you were not prepared. They would not be able to hide it. So what if you were good at planning? That black Jiao, on this path, could crush you and me as easily as crushing chickens and pottery dogs. There is no point in talking too much about this. Why don't you think about what to do next? Anyway, from what I see, there is no place for you in the northern frontier. Those Li brothers are not to be trifled with. Let me think about it." Luo Su obviously knew this as well, and said weakly, "I just don't understand. I worked so hard to set up this trap and set up so many smokescreens. How did that brat by the name of Li Exin manage to unravel the cocoon so quickly and set his sights on those spies of mine?" After that, Luo Su got up to leave, and there was no further action from the other side. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment before he suddenly opened his mouth to say, "Li Zhong, have you ever thought that your brother's ability is a little?" Luo Su's question was indeed worth thinking about. When Lin Yuan was not in the northern frontier, it was not surprising that he secretly made some small moves. However, this move satisfied the entire Northern Frontier Intelligence Agency, and then came up with the smokescreen of folk remedies. Although it did not affect the overall situation, but if one thought about it carefully, it could delay the person who took over this matter for a period of time. By the time they unraveled the cocoon and found out about the umbrella, some of the other tricks that Luo Su had set up before would have begun to come into play, and Li Zhong would be in a terrible fix again. However, Li Exin, who had returned from studying in other places, showed extremely tough methods and outstanding foresight in this matter. Borrowing Li Zhong's power in the northern frontier, he mobilized the personnel of the 3 divisions that were prepared to be sent to various places to investigate this matter. Even before Lin Yuan was aware of this matter, he had already found out most of the truth and even made preparations in advance. However, he did not reveal any information to Li Zhong, as if he was waiting for Lin Yuan to come back and mention this matter. Moreover, how did Li Xian know the secrets hidden under the articles of the Northern Frontier Intelligence Agency? There were indeed spies in the various gathering places, but most of them were members of the Association of the Demon Emperor. If they were not summoned, they would be no different from ordinary cultivators in the Northern Frontier. Some of the hidden contact points and outposts could not be known without a certain level of authority. Even in the internal system of the embroidered uniform guard, if one wanted to know these things, one had to be a Qianhu. Li Xian could use Li Zhong's power to read these things, but to master them in such a short time and use all his power perfectly, even Shi Dong and Luo Su might not be able to do so. Also, when he read these things, he had used Li Zhong's intelligence. Even if the people in charge of these things did not stop him, they should have reported to Li Zhong afterwards. But no. Li Zhong was still trembling in anger at Li Xian's previous actions. Clearly, he had not informed Li Xian in advance. Li Zhong frowned slightly and said, "In this case, my brother does have some problems, but, for now, it is good. After this matter, I will watch this boy with Bureau Chief Yi. If he does anything to harm the northern frontier, or wants to become the second Luo Su, I will personally send him on his way." Lin Yuan replied faintly. He was not very interested in the so-called politics. Whether the northern frontier was peaceful, or whether there were many factions, this was something that no power could avoid. For him, the northern region used to be just a place to live. It was impossible for him to deal with everything in all aspects. What's more, when he returned to the world of his previous life in the future, he would have to be dormant for a period of time. No matter which world the cultivation and martial arts declined, Lin Yuan did not believe that a world that could even hide from Hongjun was really as simple as it seemed on the surface. It was cool to solve problems by force, but not by force was the best solution. With Lin Yuan's current strength, he could easily crush his enemies, but it was meaningless. He preferred to have a large group of outstanding talents by his side. He could use a relatively gentle method to destroy everything of that person. He could watch him become more and more haggard and depressed day by day until he was better off dead. Only then would he be able to live without letting down the devil in his heart that was pestering him. The northern frontier used to be a tool for revenge for Lin Yuan. Now, the northern frontier would gradually become a source of incense for Lin Yuan. Although it was dispensable for him who walked the path of the totem ancient god, it was still more important. No matter from which perspective, Lin Yuan hoped that the northern frontier could be peaceful for a long time. He hoped to destroy the other empires and unify the Tianwu continent. In the end, he could open the gate of heaven and conquer the untainted land and his previous life. That would be the best. However, there were some taboos that he had to mention in advance. Just like how he knew that Luo Su was not useful, but he still entrusted him with important tasks. Now that he was bitten by Luo Su, he had nothing to say. It was not that he did not know how to judge people, but he did not expect Lei Fan to be able to come back from the dead. Now that he had put Li Xin in an important position, he was also reminding Li Zhong of some undesirable possibilities. Otherwise, if he did not say the ugly words in advance, it would be difficult for anyone to step down from the stage if something happened. Let's leave it at that for now. Also, get me some immortals. The older the better. It would be best if they were the first batch to appear. I have a feeling that I can solve some of my doubts from them. Lin Yuan used the tip of his tail to pat Li Zhong on the back of his hand and said with a smile. Chapter 9:18. The Brocade Guards' massacre of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier lasted for 7 days. Those who did not know their place died especially miserably. But what was interesting was that the students and instructors of the Northern Frontier Academy all looked on indifferently as their stupid family members killed themselves. There were even some cold-hearted people who personally participated in the suppression of these people. Although Li Zhong could not help but laugh at this, he did not feel that it was an exception in his heart. Back then, even if the officials in the Northern Frontier did not come from a good background, they were mostly the sons of aristocratic families like the Qiao family. Usually, they talked about how to govern the country and the world, but when it came to doing it, there were not many who were useful. Now that the Northern Frontier system was here, whether one wanted to rise up or get rich, one had to rely on one's own ability to fight for it. Therefore, all the people in power in the Northern Frontier, regardless of their background, were people who could do practical things. In addition to the special rotation system, each official could only stay in one place for 3 to 4 years at most. They could not form cliques or achieve anything. They could only try their best to adapt to the different cultures and customs of the Northern Frontier and think carefully about every problem they encountered. This time, when the Brocade Guard killed people, some people were making a fuss, and some people saw through the plot behind the scenes. It was hard to say whether Commander Li was sincerely asking about what had happened in the Hengduan Mountains, but one thing was certain. He was undoubtedly using this opportunity to knock some sense into the aristocratic families in the Northern Frontier. This was his idea, and also the idea of the Dragon King. It was hard to say what the Northern Frontier King was thinking, but he would not fight with his immediate superior and brother for some outsiders, so he most likely tacitly agreed. Intelligence, decision-making, and the divine power above the royal power. These three combined into one was the general trend in the Northern Frontier. Anyone with a little bit of knowledge knew that the general trend was irreversible. Whoever wanted to stop the Brocade Guard's violence was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. They would be dealt with one by one. These officials, who were capable in all aspects, had already seen through this point. If they could be persuaded, they would say it. If they couldn't, they would directly kill them. This was to prevent them from running out and bringing disaster to their families. Most of these officials were instructors from the academies on the northern frontier, or they had learned some basic knowledge from the academies. However, they didn't dare to say that they could apply what they had learned. They were only interning as minor officials in various government offices. The attitude of these people combined could be said to be the attitude of the officials of the Northern Frontier and also the attitude of the Northern Frontier Academy. As a result, the last flag of the aristocratic families fell. Not only did it fall, but it also crushed many aristocratic families to death. No one dared to criticize their disciples in the Northern Frontier Academy, and no one dared to criticize their disciples in the Northern Frontier bureaucracy. These words were of no use to the brocade guard. On the contrary, they would only cause them to die faster. Under such high pressure, some people began to waver. The situation was also slowly developing in the direction that Lin Yuan and the Li brothers had planned. Occasionally, one could see some aristocratic family heads wanting to say something, but hesitating. It seemed that they wanted to say something, but also seemed to have some misgivings. In the afternoon of the 8th day, Lin Yuan curled up on a soft cushion and was carried into the headquarters of the brocade guard in Shunning City by a guard from the prince's residence. Li Xian was looking at a group of bare-chested youths training with interest. These youths were all brought back by Li Xian from all over the northern frontier. No matter what their family background was, once they entered the yamen of the brocade guard, they became tools with only a code name. During this period of time, most of the people who had committed heinous crimes in Shunning City were these youths. The old men in the yamen of the brocade guard were not lacking in drive, but they were officials after all, and had some misgivings when doing things. Usually, they would go to the door to take what they wanted, kill some servants and guards, and occasionally kill some ignorant aristocratic family members. After a few threatening words, they would move on to the next family, creating uneasy psychological pressure for the aristocratic families in the northern frontier. However, these youths brought back by Li Xian had no misgivings. They would fight their way in, and no matter who blocked them, they would kill. They would often change the head of the family, and if they encountered strong resistance, they would even wipe out the entire family on the spot. These brocade guard reserves were now like walking demons in the northern frontier, making people fear them. These children. Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a cold light, and his words attracted Li Xian's attention. They were brought back from all the disaster areas in the northern frontier. They basically have blood feuds with their enemies in the northern frontier. There was the Frost Mirror Barbarian, the Sky Demon, and the Immortals who caused even more harm. It was basic for them to have their families destroyed. They followed groups of survivors and wandered around, wanting to beg for their lives, so I brought them back. In the beginning, I was kind. Whether it was Shunning City or other cities, the population was actually saturated. Even if they could take in some refugees, it was impossible to not reject all of them. If there were no distant relatives or old friends to take them in, they could only mix in with the group and go to the next gathering place. I had people send them food, bedding, and clothes. In the beginning, I definitely didn't give things to those who were strong. After all, although the brocade guard was rich, they couldn't spend all kinds of money at will. I couldn't support so many people with my own money, so I could only choose to help those who needed help. However, you also know that human nature is evil. The things I gave out wouldn't fall into their hands at all. Those people who were extremely hungry and cold would rob them. Because of this, many lives were lost. Some people even advised me not to do this kind of kindness anymore, or to just give out some food and wait for those people to finish eating before leaving. At this point, Li Xian sneered and said jokingly, "Why? I'm not their parents. It's already good enough that I have a kind heart. They deserved it for not being able to protect what they lost. If they were bullied, so be it. It's their fate for life." So, Lin Yuan was silent for a moment, then opened his mouth and asked again. So I continued to do my kind deeds. I took a salary in advance and bought all kinds of necessities. The quantity was not small, and I still gave them to those who needed it. After that, I left them alone, wanting to see how things would develop later. Li Xian suddenly raised his hand and pointed at a dark-skinned teenager. He laughed and said, "That kid looks thin and weak, but he's fierce." One day, after receiving my food, he wanted to hide some, but he was discovered by a local ruffian. At that time, he was beaten up. With that kind of injury, coupled with the poor living conditions of refugees, he was most likely going to die, but in the end. At this point, he paused and waved at the dark-skinned teenager. He said in a clear voice, "Who come here? Tell Lord Dragon King how you were accepted into the Brocade Guard." Chapter 9:19. The dark-skinned youth who had been called out by Li Exin was stunned for a moment before walking over. He bowed to Lin Yuan and Li Exin and slowly told them what had happened before he joined the Imperial Guard. Eru had been beaten up that day, and all the things he had received had been taken away by the ruffian. He had been lying on the ground, unable to move, and had fainted in a daze. He had only been woken up by the heavy rain at night. At that time, his body had been sore and his clothes had been thin. When he had been drenched by the rain, he had felt that his clothes had stuck to his body. He had shivered from the cold, but his face had felt warm, as if he had been cooked. At that time, he had realized that he had fallen ill from the rain. The life of a refugee was just like that. Occasionally, they would be able to eat porridge from the government or aristocratic families, but it was just to fill their stomachs. There was absolutely no way to fill their stomachs. They had nothing on them, so it was obviously unrealistic for them to seek medical treatment. At that time, had only one thought: I'm probably going to die. But the moment this thought appeared, had strength that he didn't know where he got it from. He actually climbed up shakily and dragged his body with pain as he chased after the group of refugees who had no choice but to take shelter from the rain after walking for a short distance. There was a black water dragon king temple nearby, but it couldn't accommodate such a large group of refugees. Those who could enter the temple to take shelter from the rain were mostly strong young men. Most of them were ruffians. The rest of the weak refugees could only hide under the eaves outside the temple to take shelter from the rain, or use branches and leaves to build temporary huts to take shelter from the rain. In any case, it was a chaotic scene, so no one noticed that Eru, who was supposed to be dead, had returned to the group of refugees. This kid was certain that he was going to die. His anger had not dissipated, and he thought that he couldn't let the ruffian who had beaten him get away so easily. He casually picked up a sharp stone from outside the temple and staggered into the temple. A few ruffians wanted to chase him out, but they were scared off by his gaze that said he wanted to drag them down with him before he died. So, they smoothly entered the temple. Then he saw the ruffian who had beaten him. Because he had snatched his food, that local ruffian ate a good meal with a few of his drinking buddies before finding a place to take a nap in the temple. Just like that, he carried the stone and walked over step by step. At that time, many people in the temple were still conscious, but they only looked at him. No one wanted to meddle in his business. The temple attendant and the temple guards also looked at Eru with complicated expressions. Similarly, no one made a sound. Then, Eru smashed the stone down, once, twice, thrice. The hall was soon stained with blood. The few drinking friends of the ruffian also woke up from their stupor. Looking at Eru, who was like a mad devil, they did not dare to make a sound. They whispered a few words such as bad luck, and retreated to the side while cursing. They watched as the ruffian, who was their brother not long ago, was smashed into a pile of minced meat by Eru. After getting his revenge, Eru felt relieved and fainted. When he woke up again, he was already lying in the yamen of the embroidered uniform guard. Medicine for treating external injuries and colds had been prepared. A few nearby doctors had also come. Only then was Eru's life pulled back from the gates of hell. Then, this young man handed his life into Li Exion's hands. Whether it's a chaotic world or a prosperous one, there's no difference. Only the truly ruthless can survive. Although this kid looks thin and weak, he was able to drag his injuries and catch up to the group of refugees. He killed his enemy with his own hands. No matter how you look at it, he's a good seedling. I like this kind of people who fight for their own lives. Those trash who wait for others to pity them and give them charity, and still want to have a good life, they don't care if they die or not. That's how most of these youths came to be. Some of them were originally good seedlings for cultivation, but they encountered natural or man-made disasters. I took them all into the embroidered uniform guard. In any case, we're currently lacking manpower. The next batch of proper replacements will be a few decades later. We can't just watch the embroidered uniform guard lose one person, can we? That's why I've been benevolent recently. I've been constantly picking out good seedlings from the refugees and training them. Then, I'll send them out to gain experience. It won't be long before this group of brats become talents. When that time comes, although their cultivation won't be able to keep up with the old members of the embroidered uniform guard, they'll be more ruthless in their work. They'll be easier for me to use. Li Xian said with a smile. He seemed to be very satisfied with this young man called Erhu. Lin Yuan was also silent. Li Xian had handled this matter very nefariously, but it had to be said that reality was just that cruel. Regardless of whether it was prosperous or chaotic times, those who could survive were all ruthless people. However, the so-called ruthlessness didn't refer to those who looked fierce, who would feel uncomfortable if they didn't use vulgarities when speaking, and who would fight with their lives at the slightest provocation. Those were fools, not ruthless people. From Lin Yuan's point of view, life had always been the most precious thing. It wasn't that he couldn't use it as a bargaining chip, but even if he did, he had to use it in a game where he could completely turn things around once he won. This kind of person would first be ruthless to themselves, then to others. No matter how they looked on the surface, if they really met this kind of person, the average person really wouldn't be able to handle it. Most of the tycoons on the rich list in his previous life were like this. Each and every one of them looked incomparably glorious, but the debts they owed behind their backs were actually much more than their assets. However, they still commanded the wind and the clouds in the business world. Even if they knew that sometimes, if they made a wrong decision, they might not have the chance to turn things around in this lifetime. Even if their family was ruined and their friends were dead, in the end, who could look down on the power of these tycoons? When they really got angry, they were also ruthless characters who could drag their opponents down with them. Your kindness, I've seen it. Lin Yuan ridiculed, and immediately his expression turned serious. He said in a deep voice, "Say it, you didn't ask me to come here just to show off to me that you've picked a group of ruthless people to be your team, right?" Someone has confessed, but it's not easy to say who it is. However, the matter in the Hengduan Mountains is indeed strange. Li Xian waved his hand, and those shirtless youths stopped their training and left one after another. The next thing to do was to go to the dormitory at the back to take a bath, and then change into the uniform of the embroidered uniform guard and go out, adding some color to Shunning City. Then who is the traitor? Lin Yuan said, "Oh," meaningfully, and then stared at Li Xian without blinking, and asked with a smile. Li Xian was silent for a moment, and then slowly said, "There is no traitor. At first, I also thought there was. After all, our people who entered the Hengduan Mountains were doomed to die, but those caravans were unimpeded. Although they lost their memories of the Hengduan Mountains, whether it was the goods or the income, they were brought out safely. I investigated this matter, and finally found that the problem was within us." Chapter 920. The problem is internal, but there are no traitors. Hey, interesting. Lin Yuan responded with a smile, but there was not the slightest surprise in his eyes. The situation is like this. The abnormalities in the Hengduan Mountains are rather special. Not only are we paying attention to it, but the aristocratic families can't just sit back and do nothing. After all, although you and my brother didn't kill the aristocratic families, you established the rules of the game for them. The aristocratic families in the northern frontier definitely don't have the guts to do some taboo things. Therefore, their source of income is basically built on the trade of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. The aristocratic families are the most panicked when there's a problem in the Hengduan Mountains. After all, the merchants are fine, the goods are fine, and the profits are fine. This kind of thing doesn't violate their interests, and the other party has a good sense of propriety. After all, both parties haven't met, so naturally, there's no trust. The aristocratic families don't know how long the situation can be maintained, and whether the other party is really not interested in these things. But no matter what, We can't just sit back and watch such a thing happen in the Hengduan Mountains. Therefore, after a period of time, we will temporarily seal off the route into the Hengduan Mountains and wait for those fellows to come out and find us instead of continuing to send their heads to them. This is also the plan that my brother came up with previously. The aristocratic families are also somewhat afraid of this. After all, if the road is sealed off, no one knows how long it will last. The bigger the family business, the more they can't afford to feed their servants and guards. Even their own meals will become a problem. They can't really expect them to cultivate the land, right? Therefore, long before we investigated, the aristocratic families prepared the photographic stones and brought them with the caravans. Although their memories were still erased, the contents recorded in the photographic stones were smoothly brought back by the caravans. One of the patriarchs of the aristocratic families gave me the photographic stones. I saw a few people and compared them with some lists and portraits. If they were on the lists and portraits, they would be caught and killed. If they weren't on the lists, their memories would be erased and they would be let go. Those people are all unfamiliar faces. I checked the information on the northern frontier and couldn't find out where they came from. Moreover, I couldn't sense their strength through the image recording stone. However, through the analysis of the spies we killed and the guards hired by the caravan, I can confirm that they are at least at the peak of the Heaven Dipper realm or even the Void realm. It is even possible that they are even stronger. At this point, Li Xian's face turned slightly gloomy. He gritted his teeth and said, "The list that those people are holding should be the list and corresponding portraits of the members of the Northern Frontier Intelligence Agency. It is because of this that our spies were killed as soon as they entered the Hengduan Mountains." When he finished speaking, even though Lin Yuan had expected this, his eyes couldn't help but focus slightly. The embroidered uniform guards, the Association of the Demonic the Arch, Yi Busho, the MI7, and the Ether Association under Zhang Xiu. This was the current structure of all the intelligence agencies in the northern frontier. Furthermore, these forces were all self-contained. Although there were conflicts, they were all in charge of their own affairs. Even when Luo Su and Sherdong fought fiercely, such a thing had never happened. The members of these intelligence agencies might overlap. For example, it was very normal for a spy to have multiple identities such as the Association of the Demonic the Arch, the Embroidered Uniform Guards, and so on. After all, these agencies were hostile to each other and there was no reason for them not to send spies to each other's sides. However, in general, the list of members was separated. Even Li Zhong, who had authority second only to Lin Yuan, couldn't access the list of members of the various intelligence agencies. Lin Yuan could, but it was clearly meaningless. This was because a large proportion of the members of these intelligence agencies were existences that he had created through the system. As long as he asked, these intelligence agencies wouldn't be able to keep any secrets from him. But other than Lin Yuan, there was someone else who had obtained the list and portraits of the members of the various intelligence agencies. This was a very terrifying matter. You mean to say that there are no traitors among us, but the other party has used some unknown method to obtain the list and portraits of all the members of the intelligence agencies under us? Lin Yuan was terrified as he thought about it. He felt a chill crawl up his back. The most confidential department in the northern frontier was the Ministry of Works. It was a department that only Lin Yuan knew the specific details of, but the secrets of the intelligence agencies were not lacking in the slightest. Moreover, these people were originally in this line of work. Whether it was reconnaissance or counter-reconnaissance, they were all ancestral existences. Even if one or two of them had accidentally leaked the secret, the other party shouldn't have been able to obtain the entire list. It's like this. Li Xian nodded slightly, glanced in the direction where the teenagers left, and said expressionlessly, "It's hard to say how the other party obtained the list and portraits. But what's more terrifying is that the other party is still updating the information in their hands." These newly recruited children may have already been noticed by the other party, so I've also trained a few spies. I've personally trained them, and they're not part of the organization. I plan to send them to the Hengduan Mountains in 2 batches. If they come out alive, it means that the other party is still keeping an eye on us in Shunning City. If both batches don't come out alive. If it's the former, it means that the other party's eyes and ears are not only in Shunning City, but also around you and me. What's more, the other party can check the updated list of our intelligence agencies at any time. This means that a few spies can't do it, unless all the intelligence agencies under my command have surrendered to the other party. Lin Yuan continued the conversation with a dignified look. Then he let out a long sigh and said in a low voice, "You handle this matter. Just inform me of the result later. I'll go back and think about how the other party did it." If the other party really had such means, then the problem was not only the intelligence agencies, but also the Ministry of Works and the Black Water Dragon King Temple. The entire northern frontier was almost naked in the eyes of the other party, and there was no secret to speak of. Lin Xing also nodded with a dignified look, but a touch of pride flashed in his eyes. He said in a low voice, "If it's the worst case, I'll know who the other party is." In the Tianwu continent, the northern frontier was definitely the most advanced profession of spies and spies. But when it came to who was the most powerful, no one could ignore a force that had been famous for more than 3,000 years. Heaven's Way. Heaven's Way was almost synonymous with unorthodox methods. They did all kinds of shady business. As long as you could pay the price, there was nothing that Heaven's Way couldn't do. In the world of spies, there was a word that couldn't be avoided: skylight. Chapter 921. Skylight was a building that was usually built on the roof. It was a window used for ventilation and light transmission. In the dark spy world, the organization Skylight was indeed fitting to this name. No one knew where the members of Skylight usually hid. However, from the secrets of the 7 dynasties to the interesting stories of the peddlers, there seemed to be no secrets in this world to them. As long as one could afford it, even if one wanted to know the size of the private parts of the Frost Mirror Khan, who was the most violent of the 7 dynasties, they would be able to give it to you down to the millimeter. The omniscient and omnipresent members of Skylight were like skylights that hung above one's head. Even if one knew of their existence, one might not be able to see them when one looked up. However, they would definitely be able to let sunlight and air into one's house. There were rumors that Skylight was actually a subsidiary organization of Heavenly Justice. However, the experts in the dark spy world all scoffed at this as they were completely unequal existences. Some people had already thoroughly investigated Heavenly Justice, but they could not find any signs of Skylight's existence. Thus, there were rumors that Heavenly Justice gathering the unorthodox forces was a lie. They were merely a platform that provided transactions and orders for the unorthodox forces. The reason why they were so well informed was that they had spent a large amount of money to buy information from Skylight. If Skylight was willing, they could destroy Heavenly Justice in the time it took for half a stick of incense to burn. However, no matter which rumor it was, Heavenly Justice was most likely related to Skylight. From this, one could see Heavenly Justice's connections. If they did not exist, even if ordinary people wanted to do business with Skylight, they would not know where to find them. Tisk, so troublesome. Lin Yuan smacked his lips and softly muttered. The great old rulers of the Endless Sea had not been completely dealt with. Although the Sky Demon, who was entrenched in the old land of the Shenwu dynasty, had suffered a few losses, Lin Yuan did not have any plans to deal with them. There was also the mission given by the will of the world. Sooner or later he would find trouble with Heavenly Justice. There were also the guardians of the heavenly gates that he had kicked out. Although they had been intimidated, they would bite back sooner or later. The monsters in the Endless Sea also needed time to deal with them. The trade city had been built, the gray-scaled flood dragon people had gained a foothold, and he had to contact the monsters in the outer sea to open up a trade route from the Endless Sea to the mainland. The remaining old rulers' counterattack, the fear of the dragon race in the 4 seas, and the follow-up of the evil dragon camp, all of them were troublesome, each more troublesome than the last. He just wanted to see the background of the outer god who dared to pull a tooth out of the tiger's mouth. In the end, trouble came from all directions, squeezing him until he almost suffocated. When one's cultivation base reached the threshold of true divinity, didn't that great divinity go into seclusion for thousands or even tens of thousands of years? But why did it change when it came to him? Lin Yuan felt that if he were to deal with these matters at his current pace, he might not be able to completely resolve these matters and completely eradicate all the hidden dangers even if he spent 1,000 years. Turning his gaze slightly, Lin Yuan's gaze once again fell on Li Exing. He said unhurriedly, "I understand the reasoning, but what you said is not kind. As a member of Skylight, you clearly know that your opponent is not Skylight, yet you deliberately led me in the wrong direction. Did I tolerate you too much and make you think I'm easy to bully?" In fact, at the beginning, Lin Yuan had only suspected Li Xian's identity and did not think that he was a member of Skylight. But then again, Li Xian had just returned from his study trip, but he knew everything about the northern frontier like the back of his hand, especially the various intelligence agencies on the northern frontier. Apart from Yi Busho, who could be seen as a whole and was only responsible to Lin Yuan, everything seemed to be under Li Xian's control. Moreover, Li Xian's self-restraint was far inferior to his elder brother's. His methods were ruthless, and his temperament was evil. In the position of commander of the embroidered uniform guard, he was even more ruthless and crazy than Luo Su. He did not seem like a scholar who had studied abroad for many years, but more like a spy who had come back from a professional organization to work again. I didn't want to hide in the first place. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it so obvious. Li Xian put his hands behind his back and paused for a moment before continuing. But back to the topic at hand, our opponent really is Skylight. Killing each other? Are you training spies or raising venomous insects? Lin Yuan took over the topic with a faint smile and joked. As far as I know, Skylight only sells intelligence. No matter how much benefits other industries give, Skylight will not touch them at all. Moreover, after knowing some incredible secrets, Skylight will take the initiative to contact the other party and ask them to pay a large sum of hush money. As long as people want to know about this matter later, they will not be able to get the information at all if they do not pay a higher price. If not for this, those big shots will not tolerate the existence of such a terrifying organization like Skylight. Tell me, is it meaningful for such an organization to raise venomous insects? It was not a good thing to know too much, especially an omniscient existence like Skylight. They were even more feared. Therefore, the wisdom of Skylight's leader was inseparable from the fact that Skylight could exist for so long. The entire Skylight organization was huge. It was not difficult for them to investigate the secret techniques of various sects and clans. Moreover, when every spy in the northern frontier carried out a special mission other than themselves, they would also face a series of teams, such as scouting, planning, disguising, and providing support. The division of labor was like 1,000 men and 8 generals. The members of Skylight, who were more terrifying than the intelligence agencies of the northern frontier, would not carry out a mission alone. Since they could do so many tasks alone and ensure that Yang did not make any mistakes, it seemed that there was no need for them to be spies. Therefore, the number of people in the Skylight Pavilion was definitely huge. With such a huge number, it was normal for there to be some geniuses. If there really was a reckless sect or family that fought with the Skylight Pavilion, they would probably be easily slaughtered. However, Skylight sold intelligence honestly and did not touch other things at all. Even if they found some secret information, they would take the initiative to contact the owner of the secret and ask the other party to give a huge sum of money to keep them quiet. Although it was not really keeping them quiet, it could be considered a conscience while creating wealth. It was precisely because of this rule that people felt that there was no need to fight to the death with Skylight. In fact, there was nothing to gain from winning or losing. Therefore, while acquiescing to Skylight's existence, they also sent a lot of wealth and resources to Skylight. Even if they were betrayed by Skylight, they would most likely not blame Skylight, who asked them to pay so little to keep their mouths shut. Not only did the buyer pay the price for the information, but he also paid the money to keep their mouths shut. Therefore, they deserved to be sold. How could a stingy person expect them to keep their mouths shut? Chapter 922. I'm afraid that Dragon King has some misunderstanding about the Skylight organization. In fact, the Skylight didn't exist in the first place. It's just that there were too many people talking about it, and with the secret support of Heaven's Path, the Skylight was built little by little. They seem to know everything, but in fact, they're just a group of collectors. They keep collecting big and small secrets, and take them out at the right time to exchange for some gold, silver, treasures, or cultivation resources. An organization that didn't exist in the first place, except for the group of people in the beginning, has developed to the present without a leader or leader to restrain these people. However, the rules left over from hundreds and thousands of years ago are still silently affecting the Skylight. In the end, everyone knows that crossing that line means that the Skylight's good days are over, so no one touches the business other than selling information. But then again, for such an idle organization, all the resources are actually public. Even if the Skylight members want to look up the information of the Skylight, they have to pay a corresponding price. Moreover, the Skylight members don't know each other's identity. Generally, they contact the informants of Heaven's Path, and it's very rare for them to meet each other. Therefore, it's not rare for the Skylight to fight against the Skylight. Li Xian reached out to stroke his hair and sneered. As Lord Dragon King thinks, I'm indeed a member of the Skylight, but the opponent we're facing this time is most likely also a member of the Skylight. Therefore, I didn't mislead the Dragon King. It's the Dragon King who took it for granted. Li Xian obviously knew a lot about the Skylight organization. However, such a Skylight organization undoubtedly made people feel that it was unreal. Who would believe that the omnipresent and omniscient Skylight was just an organization that was derived from people talking too much about it? What's more, it was not rare for these Skylight members to play games with each other. Moreover, behind this kind of hidden organization, there was no strong person to restrain it. Everything depended on the Skylight members' self-awareness. Of course, this kind of legendary organization, strictly speaking, probably didn't even have a sect. It was as if they were really not afraid of others' revenge. Even if they gathered the heroes of the world, it was impossible to find the Skylight. After all, this organization never existed from the beginning to the end. It was just that countless people who knew the secret had their secrets bought by someone else. That was why the thousands of words were condensed into the word Skylight. While leaving behind a legend, he also left behind some rules that were sufficient to maintain the existence of the Skylight and made the later generations strictly abide by them. Of course, he couldn't find the Skylight. This was because the Skylight did not exist in the first place. However, the Skylight was indeed everywhere. As long as there were benefits, everyone would be a member of the Skylight. It was very complicated, but also very simple. It was so simple that it made one want to laugh, but it was so complicated that it made one's scalp go numb. However, the existence of the Skylight concept did indeed give rise to such an organization. Speaking of which, it should be the informants of Heaven's Justice who often contact the intelligence providers who are the true members of the Skylight. I used to be one, and there should be one on the enemy's side as well. It's just that I'm not sure who he is. But speaking of which, it's not easy to deal with him. Li Xian sighed and said what he didn't intend to hide. In fact, he had been hiding it well for so many years. No one knew that he was an informant of Heaven's Justice. Even the leader of Heaven's Justice didn't know how many underlings there were and who they were. To Heaven's Justice, they were just non-staff members. It seems that you plan to withdraw from Heaven's Justice and the Skylight and concentrate on fighting for a future on the northern frontier? Lin Yuan glanced at Li Xian suspiciously and asked in a low voice. Although my brother didn't know my identity and always thought that I had been studying abroad for so many years, he wasn't wrong. It's just that I didn't study Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, or Confucianism. I also had some understanding of the schools of thought such as legalism, miscellany, military, and vertical and horizontal schools. I used to study in the Yun Nation's Divine Engineering Hall and also worked as a doctor in Mount Xuanhu of the Qin and Tang dynasties. I even worked as a ruthless official in Shenwu for a period of time. I didn't study abroad because I wasn't capable enough. More importantly, I wanted to know what I was interested in and what I wanted to do in the future. It wasn't until the period when I was a ruthless official and a legalist in Shenwu that I gradually came into contact with espionage work and came into contact with the skylight that I was certain that this was the thing I was most interested in. So, I spent all of my family's wealth and bought all the information on the northern frontier that I could buy. That's why I said that the northern frontier's information system is unique in the Tianwu continent. This is the only place where I can truly display my talents. Li Exin stretched out his hand with a faint smile and slowly clenched it into a fist. He said coldly, "The skylight is very powerful, but it won't work because no one has ever been able to hold it in their hands. Everyone is a skylight and no one is a skylight. Such an existence seems very powerful, but in reality, it's just a mirage. Without a platform to display it, it will naturally dissipate." However, if the northern frontier's information system continues to develop, it will definitely become an existence even more terrifying than the skylight. More importantly, such power can be held in the hands of others. Lin Yuan muttered to himself for a while. He understood now. At the end of the day, the Li brothers were both slightly illiterate. His elder brother Li Zhong wanted to be an advisor, the kind who would stand behind others and give advice, devising strategies in a tent, deciding the outcome of a battle thousands of miles away. Lin Yuan had made him the king of the northern frontier. Although he could adapt to his identity and act according to Lin Yuan's request to be a benevolent king, but in his heart, he had not given up on his original goal. Once there was a change in the northern frontier, he would try to take over everything and push everything in the direction of perfection. But this time, the fall was too big. He had been put on a show by Luo Su and Lei Fan and lost a lot of territory. Furthermore, he was trapped here by the Sky Demon. All his talents and knowledge could only be used to maintain the current situation. His younger brother Li Exin could be said to be a genius, but his ambition was too small. He was someone who could learn from the 100 schools of thought and be accepted and taught by some famous forces. In the end, when he lost interest in the matters at hand, he could still leave with all his knowledge. It was impossible for him to be too weak. In the end, Li Exion's talent was much better than his elder brother's. But he was willing to hide behind the scenes and be the head of the Secret Service. He was not willing to be a person who was full of vigor. "In that case, I will leave the embroidered uniform guard to you." Lin Yuan nodded slightly. Then, he glanced at the entrance of the embroidered uniform guard's office and said with a smile, "However, there will be people watching you. It's the night buyao that even the skylight cannot find out about. They only know about their existence. You can be willful if you want. But let me say this first. This is not a charity. Even if you lose interest, you will not be able to leave." Chapter 923. Where there was profit to be made, there would be a skylight. But this obviously did not apply to Yi Busho. It was normal for the Demon Emperor to have a mix of good and bad people. Although the main members of the embroidered uniform guard were creatures created by the system, there were also many members recruited by Luo Su. In addition, Li Exan had trained such a ruthless group, so there would be no peace in the future. The MI7 would not be interfered with for the time being, but it would definitely expand in the future. Only Yi Busho, from the chief to the cannon fodder, was an intelligence force created by the system. He would not recruit ordinary people. The only person he was responsible for was Lin Yuan. Especially after the MI7 was established, although Yi Busho was still active in the Frost Mirror Grassland, he was gradually withdrawing his power and giving the Frost Mirror Grassland to the MI7, which had a blood feud with the barbarians. In fact, this was also good. After all, Lin Yuan had given the job of monitoring the various departments of the northern frontier to the embroidered uniform guard. It was destined to create a deformed monster system. After hundreds or thousands of years, it would become a malignant tumor that would drag the northern frontier into the abyss. Therefore, it was best that Yi Busho could monitor the embroidered uniform guard. However, Yi Busho could only monitor the embroidered uniform guard. He could not touch anything else. "I know." Li Xian nodded. Since we already know what happened in the Hengduan Mountains, and there is no way to stop the Skylight from investigating the northern frontier for the time being, have you thought about how to break the situation? Whether it is defending or attacking, the Hengduan Mountains are very important to the northern frontier. Lin Yuan's eyes gradually became serious. I'm still thinking about it. Let's test the water first. Li Zhong smiled and pointed in the direction of the Hengduan Mountains. He said, in fact, they may have known that the caravan had brought the photographic stone, but they were too lazy to care about it. This means that they didn't intend to hide it from the beginning. Or rather, they had set up a trap to lure the experts from the northern frontier. For the time being, we don't know what their cultivation is like. But even if their cultivation is on the same level, no one dares to say that they can win once they enter the territory they have set up. Moreover, with such a big commotion in Shunning City, it's impossible for them not to know. Now they have probably set up the place and are waiting for us to walk into the trap. The Hengduan mountain range's disappearance had to be resolved. After all, the northern frontier was able to intimidate the other dynasties not entirely because of Lin Yuan's achievements and the demon court's reputation. To the other dynasties, the northern frontier was not to be trifled with was the fact that the northern frontier was backed by the Hengduan mountain range. Therefore, Shuangjian, Divine Marshal, and Qingjiang, who were nearby, did not dare to act recklessly. Especially Qingjiang. The Qingjiang dynasty's land battle strength was laughably weak. It was okay if they were attacked by other dynasties, but if they were attacked by a force that could directly attack them through the Hengduan mountain range, they would be destroyed if they were not careful. In addition, there were the demonic beasts from the Endless Sea and the demon venerables from the southern wilderness. Therefore, among the other 6 dynasties, the Qingjiang dynasty was the one that least wanted to be enemies with the northern frontier. Well, the feng shui of the Qingjiang imperial family's ancestral grave was definitely not good. Otherwise, they would not be in such a situation where they were sandwiched by the Endless Sea, the Hengduan mountain range, the Chuyan dynasty, the Sky Demon, Lin Yuan, and the Demon Venerables. Such a deadlock could not be broken at all. As long as one side lost the balance and attacked, the first to be destroyed would be the Qingjiang imperial family. Also, before Li Exen finished speaking, a cold light suddenly appeared. The guard holding the cushion that Lin Yuan was lying on only felt a blur in front of his eyes. The strength in his body disappeared in an instant, and he fell to the ground weakly. At this time, Li Exen's voice slowly sounded. After knowing so much, you still can't live. With that, Li Exen moved again and firmly caught the cushion that Lin Yuan was lying on. At this time, Lin Yuan looked back at the guard who was dead. He saw that the blood flowing from the wound on the guard's neck had gradually turned from bright red to black. Lin Yuan was speechless. Li Exen was a talent, really. His cultivation was between level 6 and level 7 of the Heavenly Dipper realm. Against a guard at the peak of the Airborne realm, not to mention the sneak attack, the dagger was poisoned. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan shook his head and said indifferently, I almost know what I want to know. Next, you don't have to be anxious. With Li Zhong around, it won't be difficult to maintain the status quo of the northern frontier. You can start recruiting and training the embroidered uniform guards on your side. After I deal with the matter of the Endless Sea and come back, you can think about it and try to catch Luo Su. As for the matter of the Hengduan mountain range, when I come back I will personally deal with it. Also, find a better place to bury my body later. He already knew what he wanted to know. The situation at the northern frontier was not so bad that it would collapse at any time. Moreover, the other party was very well hidden, and it would not be easy to catch them in a short time. Continuing to stay at the northern frontier would be a waste of time. It would be better to deal with the matter of the Endless Sea as soon as possible, and then deal with the problems at the northern frontier one by one. The only pity was that the incubus was still in a coma. In the underground shelter of the northern frontier king's residence, he was soaking in all kinds of spiritual medicine useful for healing that Li Zhong had collected. He had not woken up yet, and the Honan Ice Wolf King did not know anything about it. Fortunately, Lin Yuan gave up. In addition, this external incarnation of his had been ruined. After all, without enough incense power, Lin Yuan could not take out such a large sum of money himself. Without cultivation, it was useless to force it to stay. In addition, he could not use his outer body incarnation a second time, and his doppelganger of divine thoughts was also left in the endless sea. Even if this thing was destroyed, Lin Yuan would only be seriously injured and need to rest for a period of time. However, with his current strength, there was no way he could afford the consumption of 2 doppelganger of divine thoughts, unless he curled up in a corner every day and lay there like a corpse, no different from a vegetable. In the end, I'm still not a powerful person, Lin Yuan laughed bitterly in his heart. Hongxuan's subordinates, who had entrusted their primordial spirits to the way of heaven and were invincible in the sage realm, could all release 3 corpse doppelgangers. If they used a crude method like the doppelganger of divine thoughts, it would be a piece of cake for any one of them to release hundreds of thousands of doppelgangers. Of course, even an existence at Hongxuan's level had to abide by the basic law. The 3 corpse doppelgangers released were at most at the sage-to-be level. As for the doppelganger of divine thoughts, without enough incense power, it was mostly at the level of an ordinary person. But what about him? Not to mention the 3 corpse doppelganger, now he could not even support 2 doppelganger of divine thoughts. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan withdrew his doppelganger of divine thoughts. Little Black Jiao, who was originally in high spirits, suddenly felt his head sink and fell directly on the soft cushion, dead. Chapter 924. 3 days later. Endless sea, deep sea, willow rock waters. Lin Yuan let out a long breath. His gaze was slightly gloomy. Although he had not left for long, the thing that he was worried about still happened. The sea demon clans in the nearby waters were not friendly to the gray-scaled flood dragon humanoids. However, it was not to the extent that they had shed all pretense of cordiality. It was just that if the gray-scaled flood dragon humanoids left the willow rock waters, there would be batches of gray-scaled flood dragon humanoids disappearing from time to time. In the past 10 days, the total number had already exceeded 1,000. The number on the incense power panel had already revealed their deaths. Currently, there were still about 6,000 gray-scaled flood dragon humanoids in the willow rock waters. Their degree of faith was different, but the incense power increase was more or less the same. In addition to the gray-scaled flood dragon humanoids' education system, it was not impossible for them to change their faith. However, they would definitely not change their faith immediately after being abducted. I've checked the nearby area, but I still can't find them. Most likely, they were eaten. Flood Dragon 1 walked up to Lin Yuan with a heavy expression. His gaze was somewhat sinister. As the first gray-scaled flood dragon humanoid to be created, although Flood Dragon 1 did not have a direct blood relationship with the other gray-scaled flood dragon humanoids, he could still be considered the gray-scaled flood dragon humanoid's ancestor. If it wasn't for Lin Yuan's restraint, Flood Dragon 1 would have already declared war on those sea demon clans. I've asked a friend to find out. The ones who abducted the gray-scaled flood dragon humanoids are a group of pirates called Sunken Reef. Their leader is a Demon King realm spirit turtle. It is said that their sixth sense is extremely strong and they have the ability to seek good fortune and avoid disaster. Apart from that, Sunken Reef is not considered a minion or a middle-level member. Just the Demon King realm leaders alone number over 20. At this moment, Cyrus had also walked into the palace. His expression was also not very good. He pursed his lips and said, "However, this group of pirates is usually active in the outer waters. From time to time, they would go to the shallow waters and drag human ships to the bottom of the sea to eat the humans and spiritual items on the ships. This time, they came to the Willow Rock waters to commit crimes. I'm not sure if it's because they think that the vitality of the deep sea region has been greatly damaged and want to come in and take a share of the profits. What about the other sea demon clans nearby?" Lin Yuan looked at Jiao Yi. During this period of time, the nearby sea demon clans had a lot of conflicts with the gray-scaled Flood Dragon person. Although Flood Dragon 1 prioritized the overall situation, he wasn't the kind of person who wouldn't hold a grudge after being beaten. During this period of time, He had been using various connections to investigate the Sea Demon clans. Flood Dragon 1 should be the clearest about the matters of the nearby Sea Demon clans. I still don't know about the Golden Flood Dragon and Flying Fish tribes that have the worst relationship with us. However, the surrounding tribes that are slightly hostile to us have also been attacked by these pirates. Although the City of Trade hasn't been completely built yet, the existing fortifications still can't be underestimated. The pirates didn't directly attack the Willow Rock waters. Instead, they abducted the gray-scaled Flood Dragon people who went out to collect resources or to communicate with other Siren tribes. In this regard, the other tribes in the outer regions might have suffered more serious losses than us. Jiao Yi nodded his head, but he had a hesitant expression on his face. Yao beasts possessed intelligence that wasn't inferior to humans. However, most of them didn't like sinister and cunning schemes. All Yao beasts worshipped natural selection, and strength was paramount. Someone like Cyrus was already considered an anomaly among anomalies. It was impossible for the sunken reef to casually enter the deep sea, just like how the deep sea Yao beasts didn't dare to casually enter the outer regions of the sea. All Yao beasts were xenophobic. They marked out their own territories and viewed all beings that stepped into their territories without permission as enemies. Therefore, those who wanted to enter the deep sea either had to be bold and skilled, or like Lin Yuan, they had to be invited in by a major force in the deep sea. Bold and skilled? Perhaps. However, the problem was that 20 Yao beasts were indeed formidable existences, but that was only for pirates. In the deep sea, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and the Siren Guild had the final say. Even if the ancestral Yao beasts didn't make a move, just the sheer number of Yao beasts alone would be enough to kill them. Moreover, the moment the sunken reef entered the deep sea, they headed straight for the Willow Stone region. Although they didn't dare to attack due to fear, they still set up camp nearby, as if they wanted to block off the Willow Stone region. To be honest, this group of pirates called Sunken Reef isn't difficult to deal with. Regardless of whether I invited the Siren Guild or the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, they could only scram with their tails between their legs. Perhaps the entire Sunken Reef will die here. In fact, if I were to act alone, although I don't have the confidence to wipe them all out, it wouldn't be too much of a problem to defeat and repel them. The problem now is, Lin Yuanshu unfolded his body and continued, who is targeting us, and what do they want from us, or what do they want us to lose? It's hard to say, but what I can be sure of is that it shouldn't be a Siren clan from the nearby seas. Apart from the Brave Crab clan that's allied with us, the only ones that can be considered as major forces are the Golden Dragon and the Flying Fish clans. However, the combined strength of these two clans can't compare to the Brave Crab clan. Even if they're allied, they only have 2 Yao beasts. The other clans don't even have the qualifications to be mentioned. Firstly, the 2 large clans don't have the ability to contact Sunken Reef to attack the Willow Stone waters. Secondly, we're just competing for benefits. They're envious of the trade city that's going to be built in the Willow Stone waters. But to be honest, once the trade city is built, the clans closer to us will be able to reap the benefits. It's convenient and fast to earn a large amount of resources. Therefore, even if they don't get along with us, they probably don't want to fall out with us. Lastly, the clans nearby, excluding the minions and the middle ranks, only have 6 Yao beasts as their top combatants. Including Lord Dragon King, who can easily defeat a Yao beasts, 3 of the Brave Crab clan's Yao beasts are on our side. The rest of the Brave Crab clan's Yao beasts are also tied to the trade city. Perhaps the situation will change after the Siren Guild enters the fray, but the strength of these seas is still pitifully weak. Cyrus wiped its face with its tentacles and smiled bitterly. Even if they're tied together, there's still not enough for Sunken Reef to kill. The other clan leaders may not have Tai Mu's vision and courage, but they're definitely not fools. They won't do something like inviting a wolf into their house. TSK. Lin Yuan smacked his lips and looked at First Flood Dragon meaningfully. Intelligence was a very general thing. It wasn't like some games where it was just a number that provided bonuses to the activity. In the real world, vision and strategy were also very important components. First Flood Dragon might have some ability, but his vision and strategy were far inferior to a veteran like Cyrus. Chapter 9:25. After the sunken reef surrounded the Willow Rock waters and abducted the gray-scaled flood dragon people, Lin Yuan, who had just returned, was also confused. However, it would not be good for him to withdraw the telepathic sense clone that was in charge of the construction over such a small matter. He could only listen to the opinions of the two people in charge, Jiao Wen and Cyrus. Thus, the gap between the two became obvious. Jiao Wen almost subconsciously thought that the sunken reef was sent by the nearby Siren tribes that were hostile to the Willow Rock waters. However, Cyrus immediately ruled out this possibility, and the reason he ruled it out was quite convincing. Even if the Willow Rock waters and the nearby waters worked together, they would not be enough to kill the sunken reef. If that was the case, wouldn't they be looking for trouble by luring the sunken reef over? Taking a step back, even if the sunken reef attacked the Willow Rock waters and killed all the gray-scaled flood dragon people, Cyrus and Lin Yuan, what would the nearby Siren tribes gain? The technology of the teleportation circle was in Lin Yuan's hands. The concept and plan of the City of Trade were all in the hands of Jiao Wen and Cyrus. Even if they were all slaughtered, the City of Trade would not fall into their hands. It would either be taken over by the Dragon Tribe of the Four Seas, or it would be abandoned. Not only would they not gain any benefits, they would also have to pay a huge price to hire the sunken reef. Furthermore, there was the group of pirates. That was not just a matter of reputation. Burning, killing, and looting were basic activities. Double-crossing also happened from time to time. It was not a coincidence that they would kill their target and their employer and loot everything. Cooperating with pirates without an absolute advantage in strength? That was asking a tiger for its skin. Normally, the result would be mutual destruction. Furthermore, with Lin Yuan's ability and background, the Endless Sea still needed him to deal with the aberrations that had not been completely cleaned up. Therefore, it was impossible for him to die here. At the crucial moment, there would definitely be experts from the Endless Sea who would protect Lin Yuan. This kind of suicidal attack was nothing more than to disgust Lin Yuan and delay the construction of the City of Trade for a while. Such a decision would belong to a youngster, but it would definitely not appear in the choice of a leader of a force, even if the force was formed by demonic beasts. In other words, it was precisely because they were demonic beasts that, without the scheming how to obtain greater benefits for their race, and how to ensure the reproduction of their race, were the few things that demonic beasts valued the most. So, what do you think? Lin Yuan raised his eyelids, turned over in the flowing seawater, and asked lazily. The root of all hatred in this world is greed. It can also be derived from desire, jealousy, and so on. Therefore, the sunken reefs that are blocking our way do not actually want to destroy us. They are only there to intimidate us. It is not impossible for you to chase them away. I believe their employer has already thought of this. However, they can still sit on the fishing platform and bet that you will not do so. At my level of cultivation, even though there's no hope for me to advance any further, there are still some things that are no longer a secret. For example, most of those ancestors at the ancestral demon realm should have died a long time ago. The only reason they're still alive is because of their divine energy. To the current you, perhaps divine energy is merely a means of attack, but to them, divine energy is the foundation they rely on to survive. Therefore, they are betting that you know how precious divine power is, so you will not simply use it. Even if you ask for help, they are not blind. Be it demons or cultivators, even if they dote on their descendants, they would only bestow some cultivation resources, techniques, treasures, and the like. If they want to ask for help from a powerhouse, they would have to pay a price. Therefore, they are betting that you will not ask for help from that powerhouse from last time. Of course, it is not a big deal if they lose the bet. After all, whether it is divine power or asking for help from a powerhouse, you will have to pay a price. After we deal with this sunken reefs this time, it will not be long before they find something even more troublesome than this sunken reefs. When that time comes, they will no doubt be even more violent, leaving us with no time to think. We will have to follow the path they have planned. If the first time does not work, they will try a second time. If the second time does not work, they will try a third time until we are willing to lower our heads. Cyrus spread out its 8 tentacles and said in a mocking tone, "Therefore, even if the mastermind is the Siren Guild or the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas, we cannot rule out the possibility of them working together. It just depends on which side you choose." The first step is wrong. Lin Yuan grinned and shook his head with a smile. He said in a mocking tone, "Whether it is the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas or the Siren Guild, they did not attack us because of greed, but because of fear." Jiao Yi was dumbfounded. His anthropomorphic face had a complicated expression, as if he was watching a fight between gods. The old Riddler was speechless. After all, the mastermind was either the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas or the Siren Guild. Why did they have to make such a fuss? "Dragon King, how can you enlighten me?" Cyrus asked with great interest. Indeed, he did not see the difference between greed and fear. What was the difference between them? The Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas and the Siren Guild simply wanted Willow Rock Seas to bow their heads. They were still the mastermind behind this, and that would not change. For example, if the mastermind behind this attack is greed, then the Siren Guild wants more income and more related jobs from us. If the mastermind behind this attack is the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas, then they want a share of the pie. Their demands are not as extravagant as the Siren Guild, but they definitely want to receive similar treatment as the Siren Guild. When that happens, the Siren Guild will definitely be dissatisfied and will most likely go to war with the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas. If both sides really go to war, although the Siren Guild's overall strength is above the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas, it is still a loose organization after all. It is impossible for them to gather all their forces. Either the two sides shake hands and make peace with each other and plan other things in the future, or one side will be kicked out of the game. To us, this is the best way to break out of this situation. Where is the solution? It's very simple. As long as we satisfy their conditions, or be more sinister and deliberately lure the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas into the game and let them fight, then everything above can be foreseen. By then, not only will the trouble be solved, the ship will also be bigger. The trade city, Yihui, will open on schedule and there will be no more competitors. Lin Yuan said with a smile. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed and he said coldly, "It seems very tempting, but I refuse." Chapter 9:26. What's the reason for this? Cyrus was slightly startled. Its face immediately scrunched up. Compared to what it had initially thought of, this was simply the best way to break out of this situation. Not only would there be benefits, it would also be able to see the 4 Seas Dragon Tribe turn against the Sea Demon Guild. When one side loses, the other side gains. This was a very simple logic. Once the Sea Demon Guild and the 4 Seas Dragon Tribe fought for real, both sides would suffer losses. In a situation where they were already greatly weakened, they would also lose a bunch of capable people. They would also have to defend against the outer seas demon beasts that were gradually forming a colossus. At that time, they would definitely have no time to care about anything else. When that happened, the gray-scaled flood dragon person standing on the same boat would quickly rise up and become a powerful force in the endless sea. It might even be possible for them to dominate the endless sea. That's why I said that you're a second-rate wise man. Lin Yuan muttered expressionlessly. Then, he explained, in the face of schemes and schemes, no matter how good the future is, it's still a trap. You only look at what we've gained. Why don't you look at what we've lost? What? Cyrus lowered its head and silently chewed on those words. Not long after, its eyes suddenly turned cold. Now that the 4 Seas Dragon Tribe and Sea Demon Guild had entered the fray, there would definitely be a fight between two tigers. However, it was also impossible for one side to completely annihilate the other. To them, it was just settling an old grudge. No matter who won or lost, the grudge would be settled. They would just have to look at the future. However, no matter how much damage the two sides had suffered, they were not existences that the gray-scaled flood dragon person could catch up to in a short period of time. On the other hand, if the gray-scaled flood dragon person agreed to this, it would be equivalent to losing half of their benefits. They would also attract 2 tigers to their side. Once Lin Yuan had cleared out most of the aberrations hiding in the endless sea, the 2 sides would directly eliminate the entire gray-scaled flood dragon person. Even Lin Yuan would not be able to escape from the endless sea. When that time came, the Sea Demon Guild's connections, the 4 Seas Dragon Tribe's technology, and the reputation they had accumulated in the trade city would definitely not fall. They could still continue to do this business. Furthermore, they would lose the threat of Lin Yuan and the gray-scaled flood dragon person. I actually want to nod my head and agree? What's the difference between this and someone digging a hole, jumping into it and waiting for someone else to fill it with dirt? Wasn't he an idiot? I'm AF * king idiot? Cyrus instantly fell into self-doubt. Cough. Lin Yuan cleared his throat and summoned Cyrus' soul back. He sneered. Then, let's get back to the question. What if they attacked me not because of greed but because they were afraid of me? So how should we break this trap? Fear? What was there to fear? Cyrus fell into deep thought again. Flood Dragon 1, who had been watching the deities fight from the side, suddenly understood. I understand now. Dragon King means that the Dragon Clan and the Sea Monster Guild of the 4 Seas are afraid of us and don't want us to stay in the endless sea. That's why they set up such a situation to test us. If we choose to break out of this situation, we will be courting death, so we have to. Before Jiao Yi could finish his words, he saw Lin Yuan looking at him with admiration. Well, he's not a rotten piece of wood. His brain can still work. Sure enough, my clan is different from the humans created by Nuwa. Humans were also a very scary thing. They had spent countless years and finally made all the characteristics of beasts disappear from their bodies. Then, they evolved an almost invincible brain to replace their claws and teeth. It was because of this difference that humans could be said to have completely defeated the beasts and become the king of all creatures. However, the scary thing was not that humans had an invincible brain. Instead, it was that humans had such a useful thing, but most humans still chose to solve the problem with their fists. So, as long as we leave the endless sea, this trap will naturally be broken. Flood Dragon 1 finally said the rest of his words. Lin Yuan, Cyrus, the air became quiet in an instant. The entire hall was filled with a murderous aura. What's wrong? Jiao Yi subconsciously shivered and stuttered as he asked. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and suppressed the thought of killing this guy. This problem is difficult to solve, but it's actually very easy to solve. If we choose the first strategy to break the trap, we'll be inviting a wolf into the house. However, if we want to solve it ourselves, they'll continuously attract troublesome enemies to deal with us until we can't hold on anymore. We can either use other methods to break the trap or bow to them and then leave the endless sea. Lin Yuan turned his gaze back to Cyrus and said with a smile, So, I choose the third option. In my hometown, there's a saying that I think makes sense: evil people will be dealt with by evil people. Although Cyrus did not understand the meaning of Lin Yuan's words, he shivered subconsciously. The Dragon Tribe of the 4 Seas and the Sea Monster Guild had gone overboard this time. Dragon King, I'll do whatever you say. Cyrus shivered. If you ask me to go south, I won't go north. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes. He sneered and said, Didn't they want me to choose between getting out of here and inviting a wolf into the house? Then I'll go against them. I'll choose to invite a wolf into the house. Let's see if they can handle this evil wolf. Flood Dragon 1 and Cyrus looked at each other and carefully pondered Lin Yuan's words. Suddenly, they said in unison, The outer sea. Indeed, there was no wolf more suitable than the demon beasts in the outer sea to lure a wolf into the house. Even if Flood Dragon 1 was not smart, he would not think that Lin Yuan wanted to do as the Dragon Tribe of the 4 Seas and the Sea Monster Guild wanted. The deep sea region was much vaster and richer than the outer sea region. In the past, it was the residence of the Whale Tribe. Now, the Dragon Tribe of the 4 Seas ruled over it. As for the demon beasts that were not strong enough and did not have dragon blood, They were all chased to the outer sea region by the dragon tribe of the four seas. After so many years of development, the demon beasts in the outer sea gradually formed their own forces and civilizations. They also gave birth to experts that were not inferior to the demons in the deep sea. Although the Tianwu continent was also delicious, it had the heavenly gate guardian. Even the dragon palace of the four seas, which was at its peak, did not dare to provoke it, let alone the demon beasts in the outer sea. However, since their forces had developed to this stage, it was impossible for them not to expand. Therefore, the relationship between the demon beasts in the deep sea and the demon beasts in the outer sea was getting more and more tense. No one knew when an all-out war would break out. At this time, if a small spark landed on the fuse, boom, the entire endless sea would be blown up. Chapter 9:27. The endless outer sea was divided into different sea regions, just like the deep sea region. Every sea region had powerful demonic beasts, but there were also differences among them. The various forces in the deep sea region were intertwined, but they had all obeyed the dragon clan of the four seas. Just like in Lin Yuan's previous life, when the Zhou dynasty was about to die, the various warlords rose up to fight for the throne. Although the dragon clan of the four seas barely had the title of orthodox, their prestige and strength were weakening day by day. If there was no resurgence or other opportunities, the title of the overlord of the endless sea would fall on the heads of the other clans sooner or later. Although the outer sea region was also filled with various forces, it was full of vitality. It was similar to the situation in Lin Yuan's previous life, which was not recognized by history. One tribe after another was divided and ruled, but there was no nominal leader. All the tribes were working hard to unify. Compared to the same species in the deep sea region, the overall strength of the demonic beasts in the outer sea region was not weak. The only thing they lacked was the ancestor demon realm experts, who were regarded as the foundation. There were not many of them in the outer sea region. Even if they existed, they were ancient gods who were sleeping in the sea region from countless years ago. They had no connection with most of the demonic beasts in the outer sea region. In the outer sea region, the most outstanding one was a strange man. He was somewhat similar to Ning Tianxing, who was born with a vision. Even when he was a mortal, he could control water flow. He was regarded as having the bloodline of a demonic beast by the Qinjiang royal family and was exiled to the endless sea. However, as this strange man survived and gradually made a name for himself in the outer sea, the demonic beasts in the endless sea gradually confirmed that this strange man did not have the bloodline of a demonic beast. He was just an ordinary human. This was very ironic. He was obviously gifted with the bloodline of a human who was good at controlling water, but he was exiled to the endless sea as having the bloodline of a demonic beast. However, Ning Tianxing, who had transformed into a demonic beast, was accepted by the Qinjiang royal family and became a spy of the dragon clan of the four seas in the Qinjiang royal family. It was said that this strange man was related to the guardian of the heavenly gate, and the possibility was very high. After all, humans could not cultivate the techniques of demonic beasts, and the cultivation techniques of humans could not be casually created. Therefore, this strange man, who was now at the supreme realm, was most likely a disciple of one of the guardians of the heavenly gate. It was just that the two had not made their relationship. What should he do? Lin Yuan lowered his eyes and pondered. Luring the demon beasts from the outer sea into the trap, this idea is feasible. We can beat them at their own game and protect our foundation in the endless sea. We can also let the dragon tribe and the sea monster guild of the four seas suffer in silence. At that time, as the aberrations haven't been cleaned up, they won't directly attack us. They still have to deal with the demon beasts from the outer sea. If we seize the opportunity, we can take advantage of it and rise. Cyrus nodded slightly, confirming Lin Yuan's train of thought. Then he changed the topic and said with a wry smile, "However, we are now trapped in the Willow Rock waters and can't get out at all. If a similar problem occurred after the City of Trade was successfully built, they could still use the teleportation formation to leave. However, the City of Trade had not been built yet, so the formation plate of the teleportation formation had not been sent out. Moreover, the sunken reef was blocking the way. Other than Lin Yuan, no one had the confidence to fight their way out. Even Cyrus was not a monster king who was good at fighting. Even if he joined forces with the 3 monster kings of the brave crab tribe, it would be impossible for them to fight against the more than 20 monster kings of the sunken reef. There was not much hope for them to break out of the encirclement. Moreover, it would cause flaws in the defense of the Willow Rock waters. I will be responsible for contacting the demon beasts from the outer sea. However, I haven't thought of a reason to lure them into the trap. Lin Yuan shook his head, his eyes a little solemn. The outer sea was now in a situation where the feudal lords were fighting for hegemony. Although they coveted the territory of the deep sea, they were also afraid of the strength of the demon beasts from the deep sea. If they could lure them in with just a few words, even a Daluo golden immortal would be rebuffed. After all, if the demon beasts from the deep sea were still strong, not only would they not gain any benefits, but they would also suffer losses. They might even lose their own territory. We need time, Lin Yuan murmured softly. After a while, Lin Yuan slowly raised his head, looked at Cyrus, and said in a low voice, "Given the current situation of the Willow Rock area, how long can we hold them off?" Although the construction project of the Willow Rock area was planned by the Divine Sense Avatar and the construction progress was supervised by the Divine Sense Avatar, there would still be problems. The specific ideas and improvements would be taken care of by Cyrus and Jiao Yi. No one was more familiar with the current situation of the Willow Rock area than Cyrus. If the stalemate continues like this, the resources in the Willow Rock area can probably last for about 3 months. If the sunken reef launches a strong attack, I can't guarantee the specific time. In general, as long as they don't try to drag us down with them regardless of the consequences, we should be able to hold on for half a month. Cyrus pondered for a moment, then reported the situation of the city's defense and resources that he had memorized. After comparing the combat strength of both sides, he came up with this answer. After all, the Demon King realm was not something that could be compared to minions. Unless it was an existence that could not be measured by common sense like Lin Yuan, even 300 to 500 desolate demons might not be able to defeat a Demon King. It was hard to say whether they could defeat a Demon King, but if the Demon King wanted to leave, it could definitely leave. When that time came, it would be a real problem if it wandered and harassed them. Previously, when the 7 sons of the Dragon King joined forces, they could destroy the former Willow Rock area. Of course, this was because the former Willow Rock area was weak. But now, even if there were 4 Demon Kings, if Lin Yuan did not take action, it would not be a problem to defeat the 7 sons of the Dragon King realm. However, the Willow Rock area would still suffer great losses. Just like the difference between the desolate demons and the Kongming realm, it was the same for the Demon King realm and the Supreme realm. If one went up another realm, it would be the difference between a god and a mortal. So, we still have 3 months. Lin Yuan muttered softly. Although the sunken reef had been burning, killing, and looting in the nearby seas, everyone knew that they were targeting the Willow Rock area. However, this action of surrounding the Willow Rock area and not attacking did not necessarily mean that they did not want to lose too many people in the Willow Rock area. Instead, it was just the 4 Seas Dragon tribe and the Siren Guild that wanted to put pressure on Lin Yuan. Such a small trick would definitely not be effective in the early stages. The longer the encirclement lasted, the more effective it would be. Especially when the resources stored in the Willow Rock area were almost exhausted, Lin Yuan would have no choice but to take the risk and rush out to seek help. When that time came, there would definitely be an intense battle. Then, he would find the flaw that the sunken reef had purposely exposed and let him escape. It would be a step of leading the wolf into the house or bowing his head and admitting his mistake. Chapter 928. Looks like they're really working together. Lin Yuan chuckled. His eyes were a little gloomy as he sneered. The reason the sunken reefs were acting in such a mocking manner was undoubtedly because there was a spy on Lin Yuan's side. Therefore, they knew very well that there was no need for them to take down Willowstone region. They only needed to wait 3 months for Willowstone region to surrender. As a member of Lin Yuan's clan, the gray-scaled flood dragon person was definitely not a spy. Cyrus, who had committed a heinous crime and offended the dragon race of the Four Seas, would not be a spy either. Therefore, there were not many possibilities left. The information about Willowstone region's resources was most likely leaked by the Siren Guild. They had never thought of covering up this matter from the beginning. Even if Lin Yuan did not think of it now, they would purposely let the cat out of the bag for Lin Yuan to catch. Their purpose was self-evident. They wanted to make Lin Yuan dislike the Siren Guild and make him think carefully about the whole matter. Then, they could see the prospects of two tigers fighting each other. When the time came, Lin Yuan would definitely invite the dragon race of the Four Seas into the game. Every part of this plan would be connected. As for whether they would die or not, if that really happened, Lin Yuan would be like a turtle in a jar. He could only rely on the dragon race of the Four Seas or the Siren Guild to quell the chaos. How would he dare to attack the members of the Siren Guild in Willowstone region? However, 3 months should be enough. Lin Yuan's eyes turned cold as he sneered. I'll lure the monsters from the outer seas into the game. You guys just need to guard Willowstone region. No matter what you hear or see, don't believe it. Wait for me to come back and settle everything. Cyrus and Flood Dragon 1 cupped their hands. Cultivators and monsters had a very strange similarity. The higher their cultivation, the more fearful they would be. After all, who would be willing to waste their time in the secular world? Existences above the void netherworld realm and the desolate demon realm rarely took action personally. The meaning of their existence was usually to deter others. If they took action, it would be a situation where they would fight to the death. Therefore, even if they interfered in mundane affairs, it would be a battle of wits. Their martial strength was only used to deter the other party's experts. Therefore, killing was usually done by people with low cultivation. If people in this realm didn't fight for a future, they wouldn't even be able to live a good life, let alone talk about immortality. Therefore, Lin Yuan's action of leaving the fight to his subordinates wasn't objectionable. Instead, it was Lin Yuan's intention to fight the enemy himself that made Cyrus and Floodworm feel uneasy. An hour later. South of Shenwu Dynasty, in an underground safe house in Zhulu City, a beautiful woman slowly opened her eyes. As she looked around, she first used her qi to sense the condition of her body. Only then did she get up and walk out of the basement with a smile. She went to a room at the side and took some dried meat and water, squatting on the ground and eating without caring about her image. Although the Northern Frontier's main focus wasn't on the Northern Frontier, there were still spies, and the number of spies had been increasing. The safe house was always taken care of, and the rotten and moldy food and water were regularly disposed of. Some substitutes were also brought in just in case. After all, the world wasn't good. Wars and man-made disasters were like a sharp blade hanging over one's head, and no one knew when it would fall. Huff! Lin Yuan channeled his spiritual qi to turn the food he ate into energy and sent it to his limbs and bones. Only then did he chuckle and clap his hands. The power of incense on the interface jumped, turning into attribute points and surging into his body. His cultivation, which had been stagnant at the peak of the airborne realm, rose again. Level 1 Heaven's Strength Realm. Level 2 Heaven's Strength Realm. Level 7 Void Realm. There seemed to be no threshold at all between levels. A large amount of incense power was consumed, and the level continued to rise. It was just like how Lei Qiuxing had taken out all of his wealth to make a deal with Lin Yuan. That was a consensus reached between Lin Yuan and the system. Naturally, there would be no breakthrough missions. Or rather, that was part of the rules. A god's descent was different from a clone of will. The former could be seen as an independent entity, gaining attribute points to increase one's cultivation. It could also use all of the powers of the original body to a certain extent. Raising Guan Zhaoshan to level 7 of the Void Realm required 20% more incense power than Lin Yuan. Coupled with Guan Zhaoshan's special constitution, the amount of incense power consumed was so high that it made Lin Yuan's heart ache. However, such a method of advancement was not completely without convenience. For example, the breakthrough missions for each level could be avoided. However, the biggest drawback was that the level of the body controlled by the god's descent definitely could not exceed that of the original body. Just like those saints of the primordial world, their primordial spirits were entrusted to the heavenly Tao and could not die. When they were evenly matched in a one-on-one battle, they could summon the 3 corpse clones with independent thoughts and personalities to join forces against the enemy. However, these 3 corpse clones could never become saints, unless they could directly attain primordial chaos. Then, there was a problem. If they could directly attain primordial chaos like the geniuses born in the primordial world, who would be willing to be a heavenly Tao saint under Hongjun? Sanqing might be able to, but Sanqing might not have the guts. After all, after stepping through the threshold of the true God, the level was no longer the benchmark to determine one's strength. It was just a lower limit. What really determined one's strength was the amount of incense power in one's hands. However, in terms of the amount of incense power in one's hands, who could be compared with Hongjun, who stole the heavenly Tao and controlled the primordial world? Want to be on par with Hongjun? Then Hongjun could tell you that even saints were not truly immortal. You could not die, but the calamities you experienced were not strong enough. Guan Zhaoshan was now in existence like Lin Yuan's 3 corpse clones, but it did not have independent thoughts and personalities. It could be solved, but it would take time. For example, when the Black Water Dragon King Temple in the northern frontier accumulated enough incense, the divine will he left behind would naturally give birth to a self. When the time came, one of them would be taken and sent into Guan Zhaoshan's body. What a waste! Lin Yuan shook his head gently with a wry smile on his beautiful face. The power of incense had endless magical uses. Lin Yuan could now use such power in a simple way, so he had been suppressing his cultivation. It was impossible for him to do such a wasteful thing. However, the problem was that he was going to use Guan Zhaoshan's body to enter the endless outer sea, which could be said to be extremely dangerous. Cultivation at the peak of the airborne realm? It would be difficult for even ordinary sea beasts to deal with. What's more, he had to make a name for himself in the endless outer sea. When he saw that mutant, he would lead the wolf into the house. It was difficult for the strength of a level 7 void realm to be compared with those sea demon powerhouses, but without such a cultivation, Lin Yuan could not use magic even if he had a body of magic. Chapter 929. When all the genuine qi in his body had been converted into gang qi, Lin Yuan slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid qi. His expression kept changing in the gloomy basement, one expression after another. Then, a genial smile appeared on his face. Only then did he stride toward the stairs leading to the surface. As usual, he left a mark to show that the safe house had been used before leaving the courtyard. Although the northern frontier was rich, they did not treat money as dirt. Moreover, it took a lot of effort and energy to build a safe house. Unless it was completely exposed, it would not be abandoned forever. After it was used, it would be put aside for a period of time. When the news died down, they would come back to run it again. As soon as he walked out of the courtyard, Lin Yuan could feel that the atmosphere in Zhulu City had changed greatly. The people walking on the street were basically people carrying sabers and swords. With a little perception, one could sense the fluctuation of zhenqi in these people's bodies. Although they were not experts, they could barely be considered as cultivators. Putting aside their cultivation, most of them were handsome men and beautiful women. Their clothes and manners were all extraordinary. They looked like young masters and young ladies who came out to play. However, except for some scoundrels who had not seen the world, no one dared to provoke these young masters and ladies. In Jianghu, strength and reputation were not the most important things. Those who could live for a long time were mostly people with good eyesight. In this era, there were no young masters and ladies who came out for sightseeing. Even if there were, they would be accompanied by experts arranged by their elders in advance. These young masters and ladies had at most 2 servants. If they were the sons of the local gentry in the city, it would be fine. However, if they were unfamiliar faces, they must have come from somewhere else. Although the devil cult had been severely damaged by the cultivation world in the northern frontier, there were still many of them left. The sky demon's figure was also faintly discernible. Without a certain level of strength, who would dare to travel the world without a guard? Even if they were foolish enough, it would not take long for them to be killed outside the safe city. In addition, there was an even greater number of them. They were all dressed in hunting clothes and looked somewhat rough. Although there was no fluctuation of genuine qi in their bodies, their qi and blood were extremely powerful. Obviously, they were first-class martial artists. Lin Yuan even saw a few transcendent experts whose strength was not inferior to Lei Qiuming's personal guard captain. Their qi and blood were like dragons. After all, this body cultivated the secret technique of using qi and blood to nourish the blade. It was extremely sensitive to qi and blood techniques. Even with his Kongming realm cultivation, Lin Yuan subconsciously avoided these transcendent experts. Being suppressed by someone's qi and blood was not a pleasant thing. At that time, if Lin Yuan could not hold back and retaliated, his aura would crush over and take away a life. He was afraid that new problems would arise. But in this case, 8 or 9 out of 10 things didn't go as planned. Lin Yuan wanted to avoid trouble, but trouble just had to come knocking on his door. After walking for a short distance, a young man dressed in a white scholar's robe and playing with a folding fan in his hand blocked Lin Yuan's path. His face could not be considered handsome, but it was still somewhat delicate. It was just that his face was pale and his forehead was covered with sweat. He looked like he had weak kidneys and short strength. From his appearance, one could tell that he did not have a good private life. Lin Yuan avoided several times, but the other party blocked Lin Yuan's path. He did not speak and only looked at Lin Yuan with a smile. "You have something to say?" Lin Yuan frowned slightly and almost blurted out, "What are you looking at?" "What a beautiful lady, and your voice is pleasant to the ears. Come with me. If you serve me well, I will give you a fortune." The young man in white had a smile on his face, as if he was not saying anything frivolous. Instead, he was like an elegant gentleman who was pursuing the favor of a beauty. The passers-by all looked over, but they only glanced at him and then went on with their own business. In this era, everything was expensive, but human life was the cheapest. It was not rare for a cultivator like the young man in white to forcefully take a girl's chastity. Even if he did not have the heart to do it, he just turned his head away. After all, there were not so many chivalrous people in the world, and few people would cause trouble for themselves for strangers. Under the young man in white's interested gaze, Lin Yuan suddenly laughed. The young man in white was slightly startled. The situation in the Shenwu dynasty was unstable, especially in the south, which was the most serious disaster area. First, the devil cult wreaked havoc in the south, and now the sky demon was targeting it. What he did today was just an insignificant scene in the picture of hell in the south. People in other places might have died inexplicably in their sleep. Big cities like Zhulu City were, after all, guarded by sects and aristocratic families. They were barely safe, but that was all. Under the oppressive atmosphere, there was no justice to speak of. He had thought that this beautiful girl would cry, ask for help, and be angry, but he did not expect that she would laugh. An inexplicable chill crept up his back. The young man in white shivered and murmured, "Could she be a crazy woman? That's right, she doesn't have any cultivation, doesn't have any guards around her, and doesn't even hide her appearance. Yet she still dares to walk around outside. I'm afraid she really is a crazy woman. Is she from another place?" Lin Yuan suddenly asked when the young man in white was murmuring to himself. The young man in white shivered again when he heard the clear voice that sounded like jade colliding with each other. Not a crazy woman? Could it be that she has a powerful background in Zhulu City? Did I offend her? But that should not be the case. The sects would not allow us to offend a girl with a powerful background in Zhulu City. I should have seen her portrait. The white-clothed youth looked around with a guilty conscience. Only then did he realize that there were indeed many people looking at him. Although most of these people were ordinary people, such as the street vendors, the workers of the nearby restaurants and tea houses, the roadside merchants, and even some residents who went out to buy daily necessities, almost all of them were local residents of Zhulu City. Those gazes, Those gazes were as if they were looking at a dead person. I don't know who your master is, and I don't want to know about your background. But you should have heard of the saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, right? Julu City has its own rules. Don't tell me that you didn't know about the rule of 2 kill 2 die. The smile on Lin Yuan's face widened. It was as genial as before he frowned. As soon as he finished speaking, a cold light flashed. A huge human head flew into the air, and a column of blood gushed out from the neck of the white-clothed young man. Lin Yuan, who was also dressed in white, took 2 steps back with a smile on his face. He used his aura energy to force off the blood on his palm. Chapter 930. Hengta. A loud shout was heard from the other end of the street. Lin Yuan looked over and saw a middle-aged man in a brown robe. His hair and beard were fluttering, and his cultivation at the pinnacle stage of the airborne realm was on full display. He charged toward Lin Yuan like a mad rhinoceros, flipping over countless stalls and sending countless pedestrians flying. Even the cultivators and warriors frowned, but they still avoided him, not wanting to clash head-on with him. What did it have to do with them whether or not mortals were injured or dead? A cultivation at the pinnacle stage of the airborne realm was not weak. Although it was not considered top-notch, most of the leaders of the gangs and organizations in Julu City were about this level of cultivation. Other than the Red Dust Society and a few powerful solo cultivators, no one in Julu City dared to underestimate a cultivator of this level of cultivation. If they were strong enough, they would have gone out to hunt down the demonic cult members and taken their heads to exchange for points to exchange for all sorts of cultivation methods and martial techniques from the Red Dust Society. Why would they hide in Julu City, which was barely considered safe? Seeing that figure running toward him, Lin Yuan did not dodge. Instead, he hooked his finger at the side of the road. Such a frivolous action caused many cultivators and warriors who passed by to frown. Although they could not sense Lin Yuan's cultivation level, that young man in white was only at the mortal evolution realm, but he was still a cultivator. Since she could take the head of a mortal evolution realm cultivator with one strike, no one would be stupid enough to think that the woman in white was an ordinary person. However, she did not dodge when the enemy was right in front of her. Instead, she made such a frivolous move. Wasn't this woman underestimating her enemy too much? Clang. The sound of a sword could be heard. That rampaging man ran for less than 20 meters before his head flew into the air, just like that unknown junior of his. His body ran for another 5 meters before crashing to the ground. Blood splattered for more than a meter. No wonder, only then did the spectators realize what was going on. It turned out that the woman in white not only had a cultivation level, but she also had a powerful guard by her side. She killed someone at the pinnacle stage of the airborne realm with one strike. To have a guard of this level, just how noble was this white-clothed woman's identity? Was she a core disciple of some big sect? Was she a direct descendant of some big family? Or a princess and infanta of the Shenwu imperial family? Azure Frost Sword. It's the Blue Frost Sword. That ferocious person actually came back? Azure Frost Sword? Could it be the chivalrous man who chased the elder of the demonic sect for 3 days and 3 nights, running for thousands of miles? It's him. It's him. As the face of the person who drew the sword was gradually revealed, the spectating cultivators and warriors immediately burst into an uproar. Although this loose cultivator had always been a loner, he was quite famous in the southern cultivation world. Especially after the Red Dust Society launched the so-called Empress Armory, he had always stayed in Julu City. Together with the heavenly star Chang's blade demon Li Wenqin, they were known as the Julu Twin Demons. He rarely wandered around Julu City. It could be said that if he wasn't killing demon sect disciples, he was on his way to kill demon sect disciples. Who would have thought that this aloof rogue cultivator would actually draw his sword for this white-clothed woman? Could they be lovers? Someone guessed. If they were really lovers, it would be a great thing. After all, this white-clothed woman had an extraordinary background. If she wasn't a proud woman from a big sect or a big family who only had the great Tao in her heart and no love in her heart, she would probably be able to save decades of hard work and become a big figure in the southern cultivation world. Not to mention that everyone would look up to her, but all the southern cultivators and loose cultivators would probably have to treat her with respect. At this moment, Azure Frost Sword had already walked in front of the white-clothed woman, and then, slap. A crisp and resounding slap rang out. The spectators all subconsciously covered their cheeks as they watched the story unfold in a completely different direction from what they had expected. How did they end up fighting? They didn't understand. I've only been in seclusion for a while and haven't stretched my legs yet. Did you treat the rules I set earlier as nonsense? Lin Yuan coldly said as he glanced at Azure Frost Sword, who was covering his cheek. He still had some restraint and didn't use stellar energy. Otherwise, that slap would have directly smashed Azure Frost Sword's head into pieces. However, his basic attributes were still there. Even if he didn't use stellar energy, Azure Frost Sword still didn't feel good. Half of his cheek was swollen and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. However, he only dared to cover his face with his hand, not daring to wipe away the blood. Guan Laoda misunderstood. Azure Frost Sword bitterly smiled and said vaguely, "Your 2-kill-2-die rule is here. Naturally, we from the southern green forest dare not disobey it. However, now that Sky Demon is going to the south, the world is going to be chaotic. People with strength and status from all over the world are starting to run to the nearby big cities. There are many people we can't touch among them. Moreover," he paused as the swelling on his face gradually subsided. However, he still didn't dare to wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva mixed with blood and continued, "After all, you've left so many things behind. People with strength are racking their brains to get them, so they won't break the rules. For example, Old Lee and I have been hunting down the remnants of the demonic sect outside the city. If we had met these two fellows, we would have already taken their heads to the Red Dust Union to exchange for points. They probably just came to Zulu City not long ago and didn't know the rules here. They probably thought they were still in the countryside and were unlucky enough to meet you. The power of heaven and earth came at the right time." This sentence actually made a lot of sense. A youth at the mortal evolution state and a middle-aged man at the peak of the airborne state were considered powerful beings in the southern countryside. Of course, they could do whatever they wanted. If they didn't behave themselves in Zulu City, they would die sooner or later. However, these two bumped into Guan Zhaoshan, who just came out of solitary cultivation, and Qing Shuangjian, who just happened to return to the city. They were indeed unlucky. Perhaps their luck was extremely bad. At the same time, Blue Frost Sword, who had suffered an unexpected calamity and been slapped in the face for no reason, felt that his luck wasn't too good either. He had practically lost all the fame he had built up over this period of time. He should have checked the almanac before he left this morning. Azure Frost Sword cursed in his mind. "Forget it." Lin Yuan waved his hand as if he didn't take this matter to heart. He continued to walk forward. When he passed by the Qingshuang sword, he suddenly stopped. His tone was extremely cold. He said in a deep voice, "I don't care what kind of background you have. If you break my rules, you have to die. If you can't deal with them, tell me. I'll deal with them myself." "Yes, sir." Although Azure Frost Sword's back was facing Lin Yuan, he still couldn't help but bow and roar under the suppression of this imposing force. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.